this heaven? No. It's Iowa.
From high school to international wrestling, on the mat and beyond, this is the Potentially Dangerous podcast with the guys from IA Wrestle.
If you're a fighter, you like a fight. If you're an American, you like a fight. If you're an Iowa Hawkeye, you know you're going to get a fight.
Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and all your podcast-friendly apps. And follow us on social media platforms at IA Wrestle. Time to strap it up and get to the show. Welcome to Potentially Dangerous here on a beautiful Wednesday, humid in Iowa as always. It seems like around this time. Got a little rain last night, a little tornado action in the Polk County.
Yeah.
How was Ames?
Driving through here, you guys had a lot more trees down and stuff. I think you got hit worse than we did. My wife and I were up at North Ames, and we hurried up and hustled inside of the building because siren stuff started going off, but it didn't seem to be too bad. So we are, yesterday, if you watched a little bit, we were with Thomas Gilman in Iowa City, but we were on a rooftop at an apartment. We had shady internet, and it didn't go very well, but we'll have Thomas Gilman on in the future on Hager's Happy Hour. But this week, last week we had Sean Contos on the program. He is now taking over a program down south. You can go back and take a look about that and learn more about him. He was actually at Iowa State for a little bit. Then he was at Penn State. Now he's back in Iowa. So looking forward to what he can do here in the state of Iowa again. So today's show, we've been talking about this for a few weeks, and we've got the assistant coach from Iowa State, Brent Metcalf. So welcome to the show. Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
It's been a while since we talked. Obviously with the season over and lots of different changes and recruiting, I got to imagine, has been very weird, what you can and cannot do. But has this been a time to step away from the mat a little bit and focus on your family that you haven't had to be?
It's been probably a mix. I mean, I think naturally because of what happened with the quarantine and basically the landscape of college athletics and wrestling in particular, there's not really a whole lot that we can do as far as we can't run practices. We can't really recruit in person. So it's been twofold. It has been a great time for me to get away and spend a lot of time with my family. Definitely much more time than normal, which has been awesome. From the work side of things, it's been a way for us to, I look at it as like kind of develop and grow, right? Because we've had to become more creative and approach different ways of how we're going to try to continue to recruit and manage our team without necessarily seeing them every day in the practice room, or as far as recruiting goes, without being in their workouts and being able to watch them or knocking on their doors and visiting them at home. So it's been good. It's work-wise, it's helped me grow a lot, I think, and kind of us open our minds a little bit of how we can be creative that way, which is good. That's kind of the direction the world's going anyways right now, is more of a digital world. And then it has been great. I think my wife is either loving it or hating it because I'm home a lot.
Yeah. I mean, because how long have you guys been together now?
My wife and I?
Yes.
We actually met like the first month on campus at the University of Iowa.
Okay.
So when I moved there in 2006, we met right in October. And then we got married in 2010. Okay. So going on 10 years this October.
Good for you.
Yeah.
How many kids now?
We got 3 kids, 3 boys, 7, 5, and 3. And then we've got another baby girl coming in September 23rd.
So that's exciting. So
we're growing.
Yeah, you're
Hopefully
growing.
We're going to stop growing.
Well, you got the boys and she got the girl. I mean, I don't know if that was a plan or not, but anytime I hear wrestlers had success, you think, oh man, like boys, like we can't wait for them to get on the mat. Have you thought about getting, because one is how old?
7, 5, 3. Yep.
So I mean, has he been on the mat? How have you approached that kind of side of things?
That's
with
an
him?
interesting question, because it's something I actually talk to a lot of people about when they hear I have kids, and especially the state of Iowa. So I was brought up in Michigan, which is probably a lot different than let's just say the culture of wrestling here in Iowa. And when I meet people, they're like, well, I'm sure your first 2 boys, they're already wrestling, competing, right? I'm like, no, they're not. And they look at me like I'm a crazy person. My kind of stance on it with my boys for right now has been, I want it to come from them. I think my 7-year-old is finally starting to ask about it. And I mean, he doesn't know what's available to him. So I got to imagine, I don't know, the next couple of years, maybe I'll get him into something. But definitely, I'm not of the mindset that when my kid turns 4 or 5 years old that he needs to start wrestling. I come from more, at least how I grew up, how I get him involved in about anything and everything I get him involved in, and then see what sticks for them. So they do swimming, they do gymnastics, they do football. He tried basketball actually this year. I don't know if that's going to stick for him, the oldest. And then wrestling will be soon. You know, he's starting to ask about it. So that to me was kind of my cue. Like, all right, he sees what I do. He's at all my matches. He watches, you know, he's in there in the room sometimes. And I kind of figured eventually he'd start asking if it was something he could do. And then that to me was the cue was time. I just have a little different stance, I think, on it. You know, I think it seems like, you know, when I reflect a little bit, it seems like most coaches or most high-level athletes kind of, it's funny that they veer towards the opposite end of the spectrum. And by that, I mean, instead of putting the kids in right away, they know what sort of grind it is maybe because they did it their whole lives. And for me, especially from a kid's point of view, I think the most important thing of all is it has to come from them. Right? Like it has to be their want to go to practice every day. It has to be their drive, and they're going to have rough times and they're going to have times where they need to be pushed and encouraged. But, you know, the most success, or I think the best experience you're going to have in the sport of wrestling is when you really want to be there. So that's where I'm kind of touchy on it, if that's what I want to say, is I want to make sure that when he's doing it, that it's something that he really wants to do. And then if he continues to do it, that it continues to be his thing, you know, rather than necessarily something I'm saying, hey, we wrestle or I wrestle, that's what you're going to do, you know? So,
Was there a time in your youth that, well, when did you get started?
I started like 8 going on 9.
Okay.
Something like that.
So with that mindset, is that just maybe from your personal, or is that like, you know, that you've seen from other high level coaches or athletes? They're like, hey, we're not going to get in that. Or is it from a personal side where like, man, I wrestled quite a bit when I was growing up, and maybe it wasn't as much fun as...
Yeah, I probably, it's a mix. So I certainly watching how other people, or let's say mentors or people that I've known and how they've done it, a mix of that, and then my own personal experience. You know, my experience in the sport of wrestling was 100% driven by me. You know, my parents knew nothing about the sport of wrestling. I started wrestling because I found a flyer on the ground and I picked it up, and it had a cool picture on it. Like their mascot was cool looking, and I knew nothing. And I said, hey, I want to try this. And I did everything under the sun. And that's what got me into it. And then kind of like I had explained, like everything was driven from me. My parents said, hey, you want to go to the lake this weekend? Or do you want to go hit up 2 wrestling tournaments? And I always said, I want to go to the wrestling tournaments. So I don't know if unique's the right word, but I think it was unique in that my parents didn't push me at all. Everything literally just came from me and what I wanted to do. And as high a bar as I wanted to set for myself, they were going to provide the means for me to get there. But it was always very clear, even early in my career and even through the middle, you know, if I ever said, Dad, I don't know if I want to go to practice today, he'd say, fine, fine. You think I want to sit in a gymnasium all weekend? You know, he wasn't a dick about it or anything, but it was always put on me, you know, and that was powerful. It was really powerful when I got later in my career, because that hung with me, you know.
Did he have a wrestling background? Did he have wrestling in, you know? Okay, yeah.
I think he had said, I asked him later in life, and he said he went to a wrestling practice when he was a kid, but so that's real experience.
That's just a really good example of, you know, it's a really good example of, you know, your dad didn't have a love for the sport. He just, hey, you found a passion and boom, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure, you know, you're successful. I think that's a good lesson to learn, like for wrestling parents. My boy's going to be turning 6 here soon. And he does wrestling, but we haven't done any. We did one tournament, and but for me as a former wrestler, and talking to all these different coaches, for me, I don't look at it as growth on the mat. I'm using it as a vertical for him to be more comfortable talking to other people and like getting friends and stuff. So I think there's a good mixture there. I mean, if I can, just talk about myself here, I guess personally, like, and I think as long as I am not pushing him to like, hey, you got to go to practice. You're only 6 years old. You got to go to a tournament and make sure it's still fun. I think I'll be okay. But like, I definitely think about that when I hear, like coaches like you, Doug Schwab, he's got two boys, he's got boys that are studs right now. They didn't start when they're early. Nelson Brands. So, great lessons.
I think each kid's different too. When I look at my 7-year-old versus my 5-year-old, I probably gonna introduce them at different times, and there's a different maturity level, there's a different energy level between them. So my oldest, he seems to be more emotional, and I look at it like, I don't know if he could handle somebody cross-facing him right now without the crying and the stuff like that and pouting, and whereas my middle son, you cross-face him, he's probably going to punch you back, so there's just, their personalities are a little different. So I could see a world where I don't have a set time where it's like, 8, 9, 10 is the time to do it. I could see a world where if my oldest got into it, the youngest would probably do it earlier. Well, then that would naturally happen, but just from their maturity wise too, I think their personalities is just different and wired different. So
sounds like my daughter. Like, I think she could wrestle right now, and she could get crossface, get a bloody nose, and she'd be like, let's rock and roll. My son, he gets bloody nose, he's gonna think about that for the rest of the day. So that's a good point as far as it all depends on the kid's personality. So let's get a little bit. We're gonna get to a lot of things, I hopefully here on the show today. For you that are watching this and live in La La Land, Brent Metcalf was obviously wrestled for the Iowa Hawkeyes. If you follow Iowa Wrestle, we were able to cover him, and everyone knows the history of a lot of people know the history of Brent Metcalf, but I want to get into kind of like your high school life and junior high and so people watching your success kind of figure out like, okay, this is where I maybe don't want to do it or do it. So when you were growing up, youth tournaments, when you did get to that point where your dad, I want to go every single weekend. Was there a certain amount of matches that you were trying to get? Was there ever a time where you're like, man, or like wrestle within your state, or were you right away trying to go out to all these national tournaments? Do you remember back then kind of?
Well, it's always funny. So when I reflect on this, like I have a vision or like a time, how things worked in my head. And like, this is exactly how I grew up and how it went. And it's funny, now when I reflect back and talk to my coaches and things, they're like, they have a completely different story, exactly how it was. But how it was for me, unless there was something organized behind the scenes, there wasn't a certain set of matches. It was more like, hey, like the kids club that I went to, they just presented every weekend. There was just opportunities to wrestle, and you went to them if you wanted to, and you didn't go if you didn't want to. So I don't think that there's any sort of match count per se. Okay. I would say I think year 3 was the year that I finally left the state, and I think that probably came from my club coaches or whoever was involved. They probably at that time kind of hinted like, hey, maybe, leave the state and let's go try a national level tournament, So, but I was different too. It was something that I caught on very fast too. Like, I think, I'm trying to think back, my first year in wrestling, I was 3rd in the state, and then the next year I didn't place, and then I won every state tournament after that. So it was something that I caught on really, really quick too. But the first time I left that 3rd year in, I remember I went to, I want to say it was Kansas. I don't know why that would stick, but I want to say it was Kansas or something like that. Went down there and I went 0-2, got my butt kicked, But for me at that time and where I was at, that did nothing but just drive me more. Where I was like, all right, let's find every single national tournament that's on the schedule and let's try to go, because I'm not okay with going 0-2, So no, I don't know if there's necessarily a system. Like I said, most of it was driven from me. A great story is I remember, we obviously didn't have Twitter and the world that we live in now. We didn't have all that media. So I think it was just the USA Wrestling Magazine. Is that right?
Probably.
In red, USA Wrestling Magazine. That was the one thing we didn't even get wind at the time. It was just that magazine came to the house for whatever reason. And I remember looking through it, and this was early in my career. And I remember there's like a bunch of kids my age, like all their photos were stacked in there. I remember looking and being like, I want to be in this magazine. I think that'd be awesome. So then I went to my dad. I'm like, Dad, I want to be in this magazine. How do I get in this magazine? What do these kids do that I didn't do to get in there? And again, it came from me. So then my dad did the research and he found out, all right, well, there's some dual tournament where if you go to this dual tournament, I don't remember where it was. Let's say it was down in Tennessee, I believe, actually. This dual tournament, if you go to it and you go undefeated, then you get awarded, whatever, champion of your weight class, and then you get to be in the magazine. So from that rooted, he went in our community and he built a team of kids that could go down to this tournament and compete, right? Under whatever name it was, Team Michigan or whatever. And that's how that started, was literally, I just wanted to be in a magazine.
Did you get in it?
I got in it. Oh yeah. Yep. I got in it.
You remember, what was that? How old were you then at that point?
Probably 10.
10 years old.
Yeah, it was still that early. Like, I'm sorry, I was third year. So if I started 8, 9, 10, 11, I bet you it was closer to 11. Because it took me a while nationally, not a while, but what felt like a while to start winning and doing well. 10. Yeah.
You're 10.
But, so yeah, that's how things operated for me was I found.
You had a goal. Sounds like you had a goal. Your goal was to get in the magazine. Okay. Once you got in the goal, you got your goal. What was the next one? Do you remember?
Next one was trophies. I love trophies. So Tulsa was next in line. Yeah. The Big Eagle.
Yep.
Talk about a genius move on their part.
Yes.
Make these unbelievable trophies, man. It drove me nuts. So we went down. First year I went down, I won. Got the Big Eagle. I remember Matlock was his name. The kid I went through the tournament and I had Matlock. I remember sitting there and all these local people who I don't know any of these people, because we were basically down there by ourselves. Maybe we brought one friend or whatever, partner with us. Like, oh, he's won 7 straight Tulsa national titles this year. You're going to get killed, this and that. And I ended up beating the guy, and I actually probably should have beat him worse. I reflected back with my coach actually a month ago about that same story. But he's like, you were so scared of losing because they had you convinced that he was so good that you rode him. He's like, you don't ride people. But you rode him for like 2 straight periods because you're so scared to cut him and build your lead. So yeah, won the first time, and the second time I went back, every time you bump up an age group, it's kind of like a new challenge. So I think I had won at the lower age group, and then like I was in a new age group, and I was like, oh, I need to win at that age group, and that was unbelievable. That was the last time I went. Just ironically, I'm not sure why, but I actually wrestled Morningstar like first round or second round. And I think I was the number 1 seed coming in. And I wrestled him, and it was a close match, back and forth or whatever. And I remember I took him down to tie it, and then there was short time left, and I cut him to get the takedown to win because I don't know why. I'm a crazy person. I'm like, I'm not going to overtime, And I think it was a front headlock situation. I got around and behind him, but the buzzer went off, and I didn't get the takedown. So I lost the very first round. And then I had like 19 matches coming back.
Wow.
And I don't know if you've ever been to the Tulsa tournament. And I haven't been to any other than, when I've gone myself that time. But it was unbelievable. It was like there was a mat, and like that was my mat that I had to wrestle on. And I would wrestle, and then I'd win, and then they'd be like, all right, well, you're next. So like whenever you're ready to go, this was probably even before there was like time limits, they'd be like, whenever you're ready to go, just let us know. So then I'd go get like a drink of water and like hang out and like do whatever. And I'd be like, all right, I'm good to go. And it seemed like probably not in the earlier rounds, but like the last 4 or 5 matches, it seemed like I was just like, I was up, and they're like, yeah, you're next. So
Jesus,
good job on that one. Like whenever you're ready,
wow,
go again. So I came all the way back, and then I had Morningstar for 3rd and 4th, I think. And the match was actually going the complete opposite direction. He was beating me. And I don't remember exactly what it was. Him and I have debated this 100 times, but I swear I inside tripped him to his back. But he says the opposite, which is he inside tripped me and tripped or something or whatever, and then I caught him on his back and pinned him. So I ended up placing 3rd. But so then that was the last time we went. But
the last time you wrestled Morningstar? Yeah.
No. To Tulsa.
Tulsa, okay.
Yeah, and then him and I wrestled. I think maybe 1, maybe 2 other times. Once was at the what was it? It was one of the Northeast regionals. It was maybe in Iowa, Nebraska. Where do they hold that thing at? The one in the Midwest here.
I know what you're talking about though.
Maybe it was in Wisconsin, something like that.
Wisconsin Delta. I don't know. But were there any other Hawks that you went to school with that you grew up wrestling and like that?
Surtis was maybe the only other example, because him and I think it was his senior year, I beat him in the Fargo finals. And I remember sitting in the line, which I love Surtis now. Him and I are great friends. Our wives are actually best friends. And I remember sitting there in the, they put you in the chairs. And so he was second, I was first. And I'm ornery, of course, so I'm not a very friendly person, at least when it comes to that sort of stuff. And I remember he like nudging me and be like, hey, something along the lines of like, hey, you're pretty good, man. Like, you should go to Iowa. And I thought in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to Iowa. Like, you're going to Iowa. Like, I just beat you, dude. Like,
yeah.
So, and then, of course, a few years later, after Virginia Tech, how it ends up, we end up at Iowa together.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's crazy. So when was this then? So he had already committed.
Yeah, I can't even think of timeline. It would have had to been, I had Dragon my senior year. The year before that, it could have been my junior year, I guess.
Okay. So you had already committed to VTech?
No, I don't think I had.
Okay.
No, because my senior year where I wrestled Dragon.
He already committed to Iowa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was a year behind me, so it had to have been my junior year.
Gotcha.
And that was a hell of a bracket where you had Henning and there was just a bunch of studs in that bracket. So, oh yeah.
So as a guy who sounds like, I mean, all wrestlers are wired differently, right? Yeah. But you are very goal oriented, just based off kind of how you sound like your youth went. So VTech, everyone knows the story there. You're at Iowa.
Yeah.
What were were you still focused like on your individual side of things? Was there a team side of things?
Yeah.
And was there any difference between going from, high schooler to in the Iowa Hawkeye wrestling room for you?
Yeah. There really wasn't for me. And the reason I say that, I don't mean that it was like easy or that it wasn't hard or anything like that. But, I was, at least in our system that I was raised at Davison with Roy Hall, was being a leader by example. And what we did there was unbelievable. I think that during that time, I think we had won 6 and 7 years state titles. 5 or 6 were consecutive. So there was a really great thing going. But what made that was kind of Roy Hall had empowered me. He basically said, hey, this is your team. Like he was basically a mentor, and it was like what his philosophies were coming through me. And then I was kind of sharing with the team. That's kind of how it felt. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I always felt like a leader, and I always put myself at that standard. So by that, I mean, every sprint, I expected myself to win every one of them, right? Every takedown, I expected to get every single takedown. If there was any sort of competition, or was any question in the room, who was the toughest in the room? And this isn't an ego thing. It was just wrestling, scoring points. I made sure it was me, right? So I feel like at Iowa, because I didn't know any better, I just took the same thing over. And I think there was, you could ask guys, I don't know, but I think there was definitely some feelings hurt, especially because I'm a transfer. So I'm not really a recruited guy. I didn't really commit there. There was probably some rough patches when I first showed up, because when I showed up, I felt the same power, whether it was given me or not. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
I remember, and this isn't bashing Mark Perry, but it's just a good story. He'd probably laugh over it. I remember one of the first times we got there, you have spring running and stuff like that. And we were doing these big sprints around a soccer field, right? And I'd probably spent on campus for a month or something. And we're doing the sprints, and Mark Perry's just dogging, like he's just in back. And I just blow up on him. I freak out at him. I tell him to get the hell out of here and to leave and this and that. And it's crazy. Looking back, I'm like, I don't know what made me think that I had the right to do that, But that's just how I rolled. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I wasn't a dick. I don't think I was a dick, but I was like, hey, this is the standard that I operate at. And I expected my peers around me to have the same expectation and vision, right? And if you're not on page, get out. Not really being a dick like that, but like, this is where I'm going, and I need you all to come there with me, So I'm not taking any ownership over what we did there or anything like that. But as far as the transition for me, that's how it was. Is I just stepped in and I was like, all right, we're gonna win here. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about their team. Hell, as far as I was concerned, we were gonna win a national title at Virginia Tech too. Because when we got there, that was different, where there was a lot more rough patches. That first year as a freshman, you take lumps, but it was the same thing. I walked in and I was like, all right, we're gonna win here. we're going to win here. And I truly to this day believe that we could have, because with the class that we had coming in, I mean, I don't know, maybe I probably would have been wrong, but I believe in it. So.
Who were some of the guys on the team that, like, man, like this is a dude that I want to be, next to, like I want to follow this guy. 'Cause I imagine coming in bad to hell, like trying to take, not want to say take over the team, but like being a leader where you hadn't known these guys. I got to imagine there were some people that went this way and some people went this way. Imagine who were some of those guys that you kind of latched on to you, or you latched on to them? I
think what made those teams really good and really unique was that we were all really tight, like best friends. And this is something that I continue to try to work on with our own team now, and something that I've had in the past, even in high school. And I think this is super effective, is we were best buddies. Like we did everything together. Let's just say your core guys, right? Obviously you've got 30 guys on the team. Not everyone's hanging out to once, but when you've got your top, let's say 10 guys or 8 to 10 guys, those guys hung out. If something was going on, we were together, right? And there was a tight bond there. So to me, the movement in that team, like it happens organically that way. And by what I mean is, here's how I try to explain it, is there was like fierce competition between us, and it worked because we were best friends. So Phil Ketty's a great example. He's a great friend of mine to this day. Phil Ketty, if he's going to sit down and watch me wrestle, right? So I go out at Carver and I wrestle and I go and tech fall my guy, right? He watches that, and now it's inherently, without me saying a word, he's like, the bar's been set. And because we're best buds, and because afterward, if he has a close match, I may dog him or whatever, he's going to go out and he's not going to be okay winning by 1 point, because we're all kind of pushing each other in a friendly way. Does that make any sense? Yeah. And that happened through every single one of us, all the way in that kind of, like I said, that kind of core group of 8 to 10 guys, where I just saw it, where I was like, these guys they're chasing me, and it was pushing me too, because maybe I wouldn't have a great day, and then one of the guys would step up and get a pin, and it wouldn't even have to be said, right? Wouldn't even have to be said. If I only won by a major decision, and Phil Ketty, since we're using him, if he goes out and pins this guy, whoever we're wrestling, it's eating at me. It's eating at me because I'm like, damn it, he got a pin. Mm-hmm. He got a pin, man, damn it. So then the next time I'm like, I gotta go. I gotta set the bar this time, So that to me is what helped that team, or that time period really grow, is that's what was going on, and so and guys bought in. They bought in. Obviously the coaches are a big part of that, but bought into each other, bought into a philosophy, and we each pushed each other every single day.
Who were your roommates?
Roommates right out of, well, it was kind of funny. So I had never stepped foot at University of Iowa. Never took a visit there. So when I was recruited, for whatever reason, I didn't take a visit there. Morningstar, I think his dad had bought a house and we were all going to move in. But at that time, I was getting ready for the Junior Worlds. So I was out at Colorado Springs training. And then, I had gone to the World Championships. So I basically stepped on campus like a week before school started. Wow. And I know I can say I didn't know any of these people, but they basically were like, hey, this is your room. This is where you live. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know if my parents did or somebody, like when I arrived, stuff was there. There's beds and stuff, like it was ready to go. Okay. Yeah. So I walked right in, and that group was Morningstar, Ketty, Slayton, and me. Okay. Those were the 4 guys that I lived with, all the way up until I met my wife, and then my wife and I think my junior year, senior, something, we ended up moving in together because it was one of those things where it was silly to pay rent in 2 places when you live in one.
So when you move with your now wife, did anything change for you mentally? Were you able to be maybe more selfish, or what were some things that were changing for you? If you can look back and think about it.
It's hard to look back and say what. I mean, it was great. It was probably one of the best things I did, was doing that. I dogged my father-in-law though. He put us he had a house, and it was a basement apartment that had a bunch of mold and crap in it. So I remember that whole year I was sick.
Damn.
Not really sick, you know what I mean? But I had like a cough. I'm like, what's going on? And we later found out there was mold. So I always give him a hard time about that. But what was great about it, and this is, I mean, most college guys can attest to this, being very nice, is that you had someone doing your laundry, generally you had dinner on the table,
Mm-hmm.
you know, things that you later in life usually have with a wife. Those sort of things were kind of going on. So to me, it did ease that, those responsibilities off of me a little bit. Right. And she was great. There was never, you know, one of the things that really attracted me was the low drama, that there wasn't any fighting, you know, like we just didn't fight about things. And, I don't know. It was a great move. I don't know if it allowed me to be, I don't know if it made me better or worse. I'm going to guess that those things helped, you know? But yeah, that was just the circumstances. And just at that time, it made sense. I was living with those guys and basically just living at her house and paying rent
Gotcha.
at my other place. So I was like, well, this is silly. Let's just move in and move forward from there. So
Was she did she have like the same kind of mindset that you have? Not as a wrestler, but like as far as what attracted to you, and I get weird here, but like, is she a goal-oriented person, or is she like an opposite of you?
I would say we match very well. And by that, I mean my weak areas are her really strong areas. And that sometimes causes clashes too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But yeah, I would say she's goal oriented. I mean, she went through and finished her PhD while having 2 kids.
Wow.
You know, so she was a grinder. I mean, that whole, I can't remember the years she graduated and such, but you know, those last few years of mine, let's say from 2012, those Olympic trials to 2016, you know, we had 2 kids during that time, and she was getting her PhD, and it was a grind for us. As far as us basically just changing hands with children, like, well, she's at school and I'm training, and it was just a back and forth. But yeah, she's great. Like I said, in the areas where I'm weak, are the things that I don't know how to explain it other than, you know, things that I maybe could care 2
You
craps
compliment
about.
each other.
Yeah. She's really on top of, you know.
What was so there's, I always hear some, you know, coaches talk about distractions, and most of them are women oriented.
Yeah,
right?
oh yeah,
When you
no
go to
doubt.
college, there's lots
Yep.
of distractions. Especially high level athletes, they've been mom and dad, and then they get here, and woo, there's
Yeah.
chicks everywhere. Was Tom and the coaches, were they ever like, hey, like this is a distraction for you, or how did they handle those type of things?
No, it wasn't. And honestly, as a coach, you can't really
Yeah.
tell that to a guy, you know. But no, they were always all really good. It was unbelievable for me. I mean, she grew up in Iowa City and went to West High, so her family was in town. So for me, it was like I now had a family. You know, I had once or twice a week where I could go eat a home cooked dinner. I could do Christmases. I could do Thanksgiving. Like, they were kind of my family away from home while I was in college. So it was an awesome thing for me. And like I said, there wasn't the drama. I think that as a coach, you may enter that conversation when you start to see a guy being affected emotionally. And I can think of circumstances where I don't know if I'm never going to tell a guy, hey, you need to break up with that chick.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're seeing that they're being affected at practice because they're upset about something that happened over the weekend, or when you got the constant like breakups, get back together, like those sorts of things, those emotionally put a toll on you. And at the end of the day, which is what you said, is you need to be selfish. And being selfish and serving someone else's needs without the right mix is really hard to do sometimes. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with that. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
It's one of those dicey areas.
Yeah.
You know, you can't tell.
you can't
kids
tell
what-
a guy, hey, don't chase that girl, but you know,
You definitely see it. I see it definitely when I was coaching in high school. You see it a lot more in high school, right? Because they're more, kids are more immature, don't handle things quite as well. So I don't know. It doesn't seem to be a major issue, but definitely it's a thing. It's definitely a thing as far as women being able to, you know, not bring you down, but
yeah,
there's just a lot of different things. But I was lucky. My wife knew basically, I'll say basically because she's not clueless, but she knew basically nothing about wrestling. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know anything about anything. And kind of a funny story that she tells, I heard her say this actually just a couple years ago. I was like, are you serious? That's kind of funny. So the Omaha Open, I don't remember if it was the first one or the second one. It might have been the first one where I had lost to Ty Eustace in the finals because the headgear grab. Bull crap. But anyways, I was going through the tournament, and Jenny Brands ends up being kind of a motherly figure. You know, she, like, if there's girlfriends there, she kind of like surrounds herself with them and takes care of them. She tells a story that I was going through the tournament and I was tech falling and pinning and beating guys pretty good. And she looked over to Jenny and she goes, so like, is he good at this? And Jenny laughs. Is like, yeah, he's pretty good. She's like, oh man, like I didn't know if I was dealing with a bench guy or what exactly was going on here. So it'd be interesting to see her point of view. But I think she had a lot of fun, obviously, during those years and everything we got to go through. So
looking back at, I don't want you to look back at your world level experience. Yeah. So looking back at as a Hawkeye, what is your favorite moment of being a Hawkeye that you think like you're at? I know you got a lot going on right now, but I got to imagine there's a time you think about like, man, that was freaking awesome. Was there a time that comes to mind, I guess?
I don't know.
As an athlete?
To me, probably the early on. So probably that first year, because when you're kind of, and it felt hodgepodge, when you're hodgepodging two different groups, the Virginia Tech, and bringing them all together, there's some dysfunction there a little bit with competing philosophies and competing egos and things like that. So to be able to put that together and then do what we did that first year in 2008, that was a lot of fun to me, and then after that, the word fun goes away because it was expected. And not that it wasn't fun, but after that, it wasn't not a surprise, let's say. Like in a way, it was like something you're striving for. You're striving for like, hey, can we all get on the same page? Can we all get to here? And then you do it, and there's just a ton of reward in that, right? And then I think after that, it becomes more like, all right, we set the bar for ourselves. We're doing it again, And there's a lot of funness in doing that too, and kind of having the us versus the world mentality and stuff. I think that's all good and fun, but definitely doing something the first time is powerful. And then me personally, obviously winning a national title out the gates there was huge, and something obviously you think about your whole life. And then it was more probably emotional or important to me because of my brother and his obviously passing away my freshman year, and how powerful that moment would have been for him, because him and I are just wired different. Him, like the epitome of wrestling was being an NCAA champion, and that's how he raised. And when he talked to me, it was always about, he'd be the guy. I actually could care less. I'm not care less, but when I was coming through, I didn't focus on other wrestlers. Like I didn't like study film and say, oh, this guy. And I didn't know, to this day, I'm still horrible at it. I didn't know the history books, and my brother was the opposite. He knew the history books. And he would say, hey, this guy did this and that, and he won the nationals here. And like that to him was the epitome of wrestling. And for me, growing up, I was always like, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to win. Like to me, the epitome was, the gold medal. Yeah. The Olympics. Yeah. Right. So not that I was arrogant or anything like that, but I already just believed I was going to do it, So that would have been a powerful moment. It was something I reflected back and still do a little bit on how awesome that would have been to celebrate that with him and stuff. So that's what made that
year special.
That year special, yeah. And then after that, like I said, it becomes expected, and it's, I don't know, it's still fun but different.
So I've told the story a couple of times about you. Is you found out about your brother, and you went to class. Yeah. And they found you in class.
Yeah.
Looking back and thinking about that, like, why go to class? Why not just stay at home or go to family or whatnot? What was going through your head at that time?
It was probably a mix of things. One would be that what he was doing in his life at that time, and this maybe sound harsh or whatever, but what he was doing in his life, like I remember when my dad called, it was like 7:30 in the morning or whatever, and I was actually had my book bag on, getting ready to walk out the door. I remember like my reply was like, of course he is, because he was involved in the wrong stuff, and he was, I actually think, I don't know if it was the next day, but he was going to be put in jail for a DUI, which it was probably like a month or, how they make you go to jail for a time as a little punishment. So I think the next day he was actually supposed to report and go to jail for a month or two or whatever the punishment was. So yeah, when that all happened, my answer was, of course, and I was probably emotionally like really hard on him, because as far as I was concerned, we were raised the same. Our our goals were the same, our standards were the same. We were literally right next to each other in all beliefs when it comes to the sport of wrestling, all the way all through our younger years and all through high school, So in the same way that I said with my buddies, we would do it with each other where, my standard was high for him. Like, hey man, like you're screwing up. And, I wasn't a dick, but I would let him know that, I would let him know how I wasn't happy with what was going on. So I think that played a part of it, was that I was being hard on him. Right. And I was, at the time when it happened, I was like, of course, so I probably didn't allow myself to like emotionally, weep or emotionally feel sorry for him, because it was almost like, you got yourself into that. We all knew this was not, but like, you play with fire so many damn times, it's going to happen, So that was probably part of it. And then the second part, which is just kind of how I operate, is on to the next thing. What can I do in that moment, to change anything? Nothing. What can I do in that moment to, help my life and stay on course with what I'm doing? Go to class. It was simple to me. There wasn't even a question of what I should do. I hung up the phone and I just walked out the door and went right to class. Now it was tough. I mean, I think I was probably teared up in class and thinking about things, I probably didn't participate that day, but, I don't know. I don't know if I was necessarily raised that way. I'm sure I was, but that's just what the answer to me was: on to the next thing. I can't control that, so I don't know, which to me, and then when I reflect back, you talk about the sport of wrestling, you talk about ups and downs, you talk about the Caldwell match, you talk about the Palmer match. Palmer match was a huge thing. There was a lot on the line there. I had to use those same sets of skills to move on, right? Yeah. Where it was almost like, act like it didn't happen, move on.
Makes sense.
Because if you weep and you're feeling sorry for yourself, or you allow yourself to go this direction, it's not going to help you get to where you want to be at the end of the day, right? So that's probably what was going on during that time, so.
Do you remember, was there a time where you, how long did it take for you to kind of be like, I guess not weep, but like come to terms like, man, maybe I, even though he got himself in that situation, this happened. Was there a time where you, I guess, forgave him or just kind of let yourself reflect on it, I guess, and not think about like, yourself, I guess.
So looking back, being a semi grown up now, I certainly do reflect on it. And there's a lot that went into this too. And I don't have any necessarily regrets, because at the end of the day, I know that there was nothing that I could have done to change that outcome. I think my parents are probably really hard on themselves this day. They wouldn't let on to it, but they probably are. I would be as a parent, So there's nothing that any of us could have done, and we talk about children. I mean, you soon learn that each one of these kids are all very different. Yeah. And as much as you want to think that you can, like, I'm going to raise my kid to be this way, they're going to end up kind of being who they're going to be, and you can do your best to direct them, but it sure seems like they take their path, But when I committed to Virginia Tech, Chase at that time, I'm probably getting the timelines mixed up, but he had fallen out of his third-story window. I don't know if you know all this, but I'll give you this short synopsis. He was at the University of Michigan. He had fallen. He was drunk one night, fell out of his third-story dorm window, and fell all the way down into the window well.
Wow!
And when he fell down, he had snapped his femur in half. And then when they found him in the morning, he had like hypothermia, so they took him to the hospital, and they ended up putting a pole in his leg. From that point, he was never really the same as far as wrestling goes. But where was I going with it? Oh, gotcha. Okay, so when so he didn't get dismissed from Michigan. Michigan didn't dismiss him, but he wasn't the same as far as wrestling goes. And he was, I think his where he was going to be at, whether he was going to keep wrestling at Michigan or what he was going to do. His life was kind of up in the air. And when Tom had recruited me, he had said to me, hey, like, I know whatever's going on with your brother. Like, if, if he wants to come to Virginia Tech with you, we'd love to have him. We want him here, open arms or whatever. And the only sort of regret I would have is I remember I had that conversation with him and I said, hey, coach said, like, if you have interest in doing this, that he'd like you. And he goes, well, what do you think? And again, I was hard on him, right? And being a grown adult now, I regret that, because I was like, well, I want you there, but if you think you're going to smoke drugs and you think you're going to drink and you think you're going to do all these things, then don't even waste your time coming. Like, I was just hard on him, you know? And for sure, looking back, I know just my experience with a lot of the same sorts of situations, and kids, not kids, but just, kids, what was effective with them is what he needed was a giant like hug. And he needed like, please come. I need you there.
Yeah.
Like, even if you're not wrestling, I want you there. I want you there with me. That sort of approach would have been the better way to handle that. And I know that I know for a fact that if he would have gone, which I don't think he would have ever gone, especially I've talked about this. Like, I think that where he was at, he wasn't going to leave that lifestyle. But in theory, had he gone, it would have changed his life, because we would have been there on our own. We would have been in the mountains of Virginia on our own. We wouldn't have known a single person, and we had to make it work for each other. We'd have been there for each other.
Yeah.
And obviously, what happened, the transformation that happened even in the culture there at Virginia Tech was instant. And I remember being there and thinking, like, Chase would have thrived here. Like, this would have worked for him. So,
it's crazy.
That's my yeah.
It's crazy how certain things in our lives just one decision, one decision could change me personally, or your brother. It's so obviously, I mean, you were going through some shit at a high level. You're a Division I athlete, student, got a girlfriend. I mean, high expectations for yourself and Hawkeye fans. High expectation, like, you're expected to win, right? Did any of that outside pressure, obviously winning the national title, was there, did you feel the outside pressure? Because you already put a ton on yourself. Is that a real thing?
I never felt it, because like you just said, it was all, I put it on there. I expected to go out and tech fall and pin every single person I wrestled, right? So there's no higher pressure that could have ever been put on me than what I was putting on my own self, right? I went in, I was going to win 3 Hodge trophies. Right? You think, I mean, the fans would have loved that, but I don't think their expectation was that I had to win 3 Hodge trophies. That was mine, right? So if there was any disappointment, if there was any feeling of pressure or letdown because I didn't do all the things I wanted to do, it was just internally, And that's what, again, talk about the sport of wrestling, that's what's awesome about it, is it teaches you to manage those things, right? Because those things could crush you. If I set those expectations for myself, even talking about my whole career, and I don't meet them, again, I got a choice. Am I going to like pity on myself? Am I going to feel bad for myself because I didn't do what I wanted? Or am I just going to go back to work? So no, I don't think I ever felt like pressure that, if I don't perform or if the team doesn't perform, that this is going to happen, because it was what and by we, I mean, like I said, we had a great group of guys where like we all just had that expectation. Expectation was here. So
you mentioned Palmer, mentioned Caldwell. That video gets played nonstop.
I'm sure we'll see more of it now that this event's going on.
And you talk about having to just, hey, like, that's in the past and I got to go for the next goal. When you lose at that point, were you the guy that was right in the room the next day, or like, how were you able to put it in the past, or was it really not in the past and deep down for you?
I'm not saying I was right in the room the next day, but it was basically back to work. I think Tom tells a story that they had wanted me not to compete at the trials that year, and I was like, absolutely not. I'm going to the trials. So yeah, I was definitely a right back to work guy. I am kind of a even I'm goofy. Okay. So even though I'm super intense, I'm still a pretty goofy guy and I can laugh and have fun. And I'm really like an internal optimist a little bit. So I always look like at positive things. You know what I mean? So when that happened, I was upset, but it's not like it crushed me and like my life was over. It was like, all right, this happened. What's the next thing? The U.S. Open. I want to win this thing. I got my butt kicked last year. All right. Can I creep closer up to, to being where I want to be? Right. So that was kind of my approach there. And, reflecting back on that, there was a lot of things I learned in that match, and I give him and his coach, all the credit in the world. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Him and his coach, all the credit in the world for showing up and obviously competing at a pace that he did and keeping it. Right. Because that was maybe the downfall he had early in the year, which you could argue probably put me at ease a little bit. Yeah. Right. Like, I tech faulted him in the All-Star Classic. So I'm not saying I was just assuming it was going to happen, but there's a lot of things leading up in that entire year. You talk about you win, and if there's pressure, there was basically in my head how I was wired that entire year was I'm going to win, right? And not in an arrogant way, but just like I'm going to win. Okay, so I need a higher goal than winning the national title because like that I'm going to do that. Mm-hmm. What's next? I'm going to make the world team. So I would say, and probably a fault a little bit, and this has been valuable for me in my personal and coaching career, is spotting these things. In that I was wired that entire season, I was focused on winning the world team, making the world team, and that was just subconsciously, right? It wasn't like I was in there doing freestyle every day. But when you think about you wake up and what's driving you in the morning, I'm going to win the national title. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make the world team. Right. And I would say my focus was probably too much on that. And it was probably there's a balance of thinking that something's going to be automatic. Mm-hmm. Right. And again, this is just some insight, but just to talk about, I use this as a learning story. How about that? This is not an excuse story. This is a learning story. So before the finals that day, I was still training in my mind. Right. Because I was going to win. Mm-hmm. I was going to win, but I was still training because a month after that, I had to go make the world team, something I've never done or even been close to yet doing. So that morning, I did 10 one-minute bike sprints on the Airdyne. And to me, I was like, well, it's only 10 minutes because it's going to be good, good workout. But my mind was like skewing, like I'm training, almost like I'm training through this thing. Yeah. And not really, but like when I reflect back on it, and it helped me a ton later on in my career. When my mind is wanting to do those things, I can self-correct because I went through that experience where I'm like, whoa. No, let's focus on this one thing at a time, right? Let's focus on making the world team before I win the damn the world medal, right? So yeah, that was a big error in judgment probably that happened. But again, I'm an optimist. So when I went through that, and obviously there was some, you're upset about it, but then it was, that moment was able to help me kind of reflect a little bit and say, hey, all right, quit being such a crazy maniac. Like, you're not invincible. Mm-hmm. You can't do that before the NCAA finals. You're going to feel like crap. And that's, again, not an excuse. Yeah. That dude.
I think fans felt that way too. They felt Brent Metcalf. He's a machine. He can't be stopped.
And I had myself convinced of it, which is actually not a bad thing.
Yeah.
As far as like believing in yourself. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no doubt.
I mean, I think the fans felt that. So what year was that?
That was 9.
So 2009. So 2009, Russell wasn't even born. So I was a fan. Yeah. And we, and the fans believe that. So yeah. Because I think watching your interviews and the way you talk and people always compare, like, man, he's perfect for, Tom Brands is perfect for him. He's perfect for Tom Brands as far as just kind of their mental side of things. But, like, was it though? Right? I'm just curious, like, did your coach get you, or was it just all yourself? Like, did you, like you said, like you had this training in the morning, like, did you overtrain? Did the coaches kind of, Did they tell you, like, hey, you're unstoppable, or is this just you and yourself?
This is just me. They keep? No, I'm not pointing anything. No, this was not a. in fact, after that, I think I talked to Tom and I was like, hey, here's what I did. And he was like, what are you doing? You know, he's like, what did you do the year before when you won? I goes, well, I got up with Joe Slayton because Slayton was in the finals, right? Me and Joey got up and we walked around the block once and then we went back and sat down. He goes, so then you decided to change and do that? You know, so no, it definitely was not anything driven from him. If anything, again, learning moment for me was, and this isn't to, you know, say they should have done anything different, was, you know, when I've been in that situation, I'm like all over my athletes because of my experience. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? What's your plan? Because at that time, and especially where I was at and as an athlete, there was a lot of independence, right? Like, all right, Metcalf's, he's already got his routine. He knows what's happening. Does that make sense? They left you alone.
Yep, they left you alone.
Yeah, which is, that's how it should have been. And it was right that way. But now as a coach, I mean, I give them their independence, but now just because I had that kind of moment, I'm like, hey, what exactly are you doing?
Yeah.
And then I usually tone it down, right? Because guys get that way. They're like, they want to overdo it. And I'm like, like, no, you're not going to wake up and run 2 miles, you know? Well, coach, I run 2 miles every day. I know you do, but you're not doing it today. Like, we're going to do something to get your body moving. And right or wrong, I could be wrong. Maybe the guy needed 2 miles, but you know, that.
How was your weight?
My weight?
Did you?
Easy.
Never an issue.
No, I think the heaviest, I remember in my career, I stepped on a scale once and it said 161 pounds. And I was like, whoa, I am freaking huge. And that was probably after like a weekend of wings and pop and crap. So the biggest I ever remember being is 61. So it's 12 over. So I would say most days when I left practice, I was within that 1 to 2 pounds or on weight, depending on the day.
Because, I mean, back. We're back. But with someone with your intensity and focus, like I could see, and I have seen how you can get too focused on the cutting the weight type of thing too. Like, hey, I'm 12 pounds over. It's a goal. So, you know, as far as a coach now, like, do you keep those things in check? Like, do you see personalities where like the weight is the only goal they have, and being an NCAA champ is not even a goal. It's always about the weight.
Yeah.
And you just never had any of that with yourself?
No, because it was probably how I was raised, and it probably helped that I was successful, right? So I would imagine my story is different than somebody else. So, I mean, a person or a kid who's in high school and he's got someone ahead of him that he can't beat, right? And he's like, well, I got to cut weight to get to the next weight class or whatever. That wasn't necessarily a challenge that I had to face, so I maybe can't relate to that. But my thing was, I'm going to go what I weigh. Like, even high school, I didn't cut no weight. I mean, my day of weigh-ins, I would eat 1 chicken sandwich instead of 2 chicken sandwiches. You know, now maybe I was lucky that I didn't have to worry about it, but that was just kind of my mind. Like, I'll go what I weigh, and I typically weighed about 156 pounds or whatever. So that means that 149 is my weight class. You know, and I wrestled that weight most of high school and college and internationally. So
you kept it pretty clean. Okay, so through college, obviously the end of your career, so going towards the world level now.
Yeah.
What did it take for you? Because did you make the world? You didn't make the world.
I made the world team in 10.
Okay.
2010.
So 1 year.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that year. What made you jump to that next level? Like, well, how did you have to go from, you know, being a college folk style wrestler? Was there a jump for you to get to that world level where not only are you beating people in the United States hard, to now having to try to compete internationally?
Yeah. To me, at least at that time, let's just say early on, it was just a matter of just figuring it out, right? So first step is believing in yourself. One. So I remember the first U.S. Open I went to, for some reason, I have no idea why, they seeded me 8th in the tournament, and Doug Schwab wasn't even seeded.
Okay.
You know, but I just remember thinking like, oh my God, my coach who kicks my butt every day in practice isn't even seeded in this tournament. And like, I don't know why they seeded me 8th. Like, so like, you know, first step is like believing in yourself, right? So you walk in there and you're kind of feeling out the territory, feeling out where you're at, and you have some failures, you have some success. And then I think along that process, you start to believe like, oh, hey, Like, all right, I've done these things. Yeah, I really am at this level, right? I really can be at this level, even though you believe in yourself, but it's probably subconscious. I remember that first one. I was scared. Just like the first time I went to Fargo, I remember as a junior, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how I can win this. Like, cause there was all these guys, there was guys that my brother used to have to wrestle where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And then I won and I was like, oh, all right. And then it was like a tear after that. And to me, the international was kind of the same thing where I had to earn it. You know what I mean? I had to earn it, and I had to convince myself through earning it that I maybe deserved the spot or that I was the guy, And that happens a lot in college wrestling. I don't know why maybe I didn't go through that in college wrestling. I just believed it right away. And maybe this is the dynamic, like I said, of having your coach, the guy that I'm training with, like, oh, I'm trying to wrestle at his level. Like, this is a different world we're at here, right? And maybe it wasn't, So, but to me, that was biggest part is kind of believing in it and then making adjustments, making the simple adjustments. I remember Larkin, every time I wrestled that dude, he'd roll me right up, leg laces, So just technically and tactically is a fair word too, of just making the adjustments not to go out and get yourself in a situation where, against Larkin, for instance, that you're going to get rolled up in a leg lace and the match will be over in 1 minute. Give yourself a shot because if I don't know, because I never made it past the first minute with him, but let's say it goes all 6 minutes, maybe you got a shot there, maybe you're getting closer to this guy just by making some adjustments. So that's what it was. That's to me, the belief and getting over those hurdles. I had to beat Doug Schwab to make the team. Getting over those hurdles is what kind of got me to where I was in 10, I guess.
Were you harder on yourself at the world level than you were the collegiate level?
What do you mean when you say
training that? Or just after you lose, like reflecting on the match and just having to refocus on the next goal?
No, I don't know if it's really hard to say because I didn't really lose a whole ton in college. So it's not like I have a bunch in international. I lost a lot.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, you talk about my personality in college. A lot of that was wasn't made up, but it was like you tell yourself these things just to keep the image, right? To keep the
for you and your teammates.
The world's scared of you, right? So keep feeding it. Keep feeding it, right? And internationally, it gets to be humbling. It was funny after, I don't remember what world trials it was. It probably was like 13 or something like that. My mom called me after because she hated my interviews. Like in college, she'd call me, Brent, what are you doing? Like I remember I beat Bubba Jenkins. She called me right after the interview. What are you doing? You're talking in third person. You sound like a crazy person. Stop doing that. And I was like, Mom, you know what you're talking about. So after that, I did an interview and she's like, Brent, thank you so much. That was such a wonderful interview and this and that. And we joke about it now. But I think probably the difference between those maybe two personalities, you could say, is just being humbled. Like I lost a lot internationally, right? And how you going to sit there and talk like you're this or that, and like I go out and dominate and I do this, and which was kind of a persona in college, right? I can't sit there honestly and say that when I go to the next international tournament and I ain't winning, right? I'm not even making it out of the first round at the world tournament, right? Or I'm going 1 and 2 or whatever. I'm not even scratching the level of success that I'm sitting here talking about. So to me, that was humbling, and it probably, whether it was for good or bad, I don't know, you could argue that I should have kept brainwashing myself, right? But to me, it was like, all right, well, let's just be honest here. You got a lot of growth to do because you're not even close to winning a medal yet,
What do you think it is about we in the United States, we are so passionate about folk style or college wrestling.
Yeah.
And then you get to the international level and it's just a whole nother level, right? I mean, the competition, like you go from you're expected to win every single college match to now you're on the world level and you could go 0-2 pretty easy, right?
Or 0-1.
Yeah. Or 1. So what is it about that next level up that people do people just not respect it, or do they not understand the rules? But as an athlete, like it's can you touch a little bit on how that is such a big jump from being in the NCAA finals to say Medved?
And I would say, to me, this is my opinion, I don't know nothing about nothing, but to me, it's your attachment to the university, right? So if you're a Hawkeye fan or a Cyclone fan, you are ravenous about our wrestlers because you're also a football fan. You're also, I mean, there's some people that are hardcore wrestling fans only, but the large numbers, you talk about the thousands of people that show up to watch us wrestle. I think a lot of that is the attachment to the university and the attachment to a team, right? Now you can say, well, Team USA is a team. Yeah, it is, but it's not the same. It's not, it's not even close to being the same. And it never will be the same. I think that there's been a lot of growth in the viewership of freestyle wrestling, let's just say, or the women or Greco or whatever. There's been a lot of growth in that area, but I think that that's probably come from our media outlets, right? Where they're live broadcast. So you're making it more available to people so that they get to see it. Before, you never, I mean, especially back when I was first started wrestling, there wasn't even a cell phone, let alone camera, so you could watch what was going on and see how exciting it is. I mean, it's definitely the most exciting, talking about freestyle right now, exciting style of wrestling. Yeah. The rules they have right now are unbelievable. The matches, I mean, not all of them, some of them are boring, but generally the matches are way better product than what they used to be, even when I was going through. When I look at it, I'm like, geez, I wish I'd had my whole career under those sets of rules. The damn ball grab, that was the worst. Yeah. Especially for my style. I'm willing to admit that I'm not the guy that's going to go blow out a bunch of points in the first 2 minutes, right? And then take a break and then 2 minutes wrestling, right? I'm a 6-minute guy, So that's, to me, it's just the affiliation to the university. And the only way you're going to ever change that is if, for instance, which has been discussed way too much, for instance, if they were to make college wrestling freestyle and then it translated somehow, but you'd still have to have the attachment, right? And you kind of see that with the clubs, right? Yeah. So clubs now have better following, let's say. I mean, I remember being at the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, there would be 20, 30 people that come to the World Championships. And that's because it's because you were a Hawkeye. Yeah. It wasn't because, and I'm sure they would admit this, it was because of your college career. 100%. And they followed you then. They're excited about you now. Now you're in the college version of freestyle wrestling, so that's why they're over there. They're not, if you removed all that, they wouldn't just naturally be going to the World Championships just to check out wrestling, right? So, I don't know. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I've always, like, when you go to World Team Trials, as fans, we all know, like college fans, if you're heavy into college, we know that the next level is freestyle, the world level. It's at a whole nother level. And there is that's exact, you're on point where people just, you're a Hawkeye, you're a Penn Stater, you're a Cyclone, whatever it may be. I mean, you could be a Penn State fan, say Thomas Gilman or Dayton Fix is a 57, and you might not like that school and you just might not cheer for that guy. Even though he's repping red, white, and blue, like somehow we have to find,
or it's going to be hard. Like you're going to fight internally. Be like,
like you're not going to cheer for that guy. Like, and that's how we can maybe get over that hump a little bit as fans. Is just to see red, white, and blue versus black and gold, red and yellow, whatever it may be, right? Yeah. So I hope for that time at one point. And it seems like it does come around during the Olympics. I don't think a whole lot during the world championships. I just don't see that. One thing that was cool is when they did those duels for the cup, the World Cup. I felt like the dual style was awesome. It was awesome. It was
more as an athlete. It was a ton of fun. It was great. But in comparison, think about this: the one in LA that I was in, you had Iran, you had Russia. I think Cuba was there. I think too, which is hard to get them over here anymore. You had the best wrestling in the entire world, right? So I would put it up against watching wrestling at the World Championships, right? We had it in our backyard. And there was probably, was it 2,000 people there? Yeah. 3? Maybe there wasn't. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't packed, you know? And I remember sitting there and being like, imagine just taking, I mean, you attach universities to these guys and you put them in, like, you see these matches. There's more fans just for that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't know how you get over that hump, but it's definitely there. I mean, the product is right. I think the product's right now. I don't know how you get that, and I don't know what it solves either, other than
true.
I mean, if you think about amateur sports, though, this is what I was going to say as you were talking. Think about amateur sports. You know, think about the following of swimming and the following of all these other. It's the same story. You know, they don't have huge followings in their Olympic level competitions, the World Championships for all those other sports, right? So I don't know. I don't know what our expectation would be. You know, I've seen, if you look at the Russian model, the Iranian model, I mean, Iran. So to compare, Iran's World Cup when we were there was just as or more ravenous than you've ever seen it at any college wrestling event. And there was 15 to 16,000 people there. They were on top of each other.
Kazoos.
It was unbelievable.
Buzzing.
It was like nothing I've ever seen in my entire life. And they were good fans. So you talk about having fans. They were great fans. They respected. It wasn't like I remember when we wrestled Iran, and like if there was a controversial call, they're gonna boo or whatever like that. But there was a few times the guys went out and like whooped the Iran guy's ass, and everyone cheered like crazy, right? Like they loved Jordan because he'd go out and whoop their ass, and they respected that, and they respected the wrestling display, right? So yeah, I don't know, but they're a completely different system, you know. Think about that world. They don't have football.
No.
They don't have basketball. All they have is wrestling.
That's all they do. That's all they do. Yeah, and that's some of them don't even go to school. That's crazy hearing some of those things. So, all right, so we're kind of going down a storyline here, and
I'm messing up your
Nope, no, this is great. This is great.
I do circles. I like to do
circles. I know you don't have to go to a recruiting trip, so I've got you.
Got nothing.
I got to. So, how many world teams did you make?
4.
Okay. Competed quite a while at that world level, representing the United States quite a bit for a while. What was it made you decide, I should hang it up? Was it Hawkeye Wrestling Club or that direction of where things were going? What's maybe some misconceptions of why you got out of it?
It just felt like it was time. No, and that didn't happen instantly. I guess you have and this was just me. I don't know how most guys do it. But you have a vision like, all right, here's what I want to do. It's 2010. And there's going to be some rough patches. I'm going to make the Olympic team in 12. Hopefully win a medal there. I didn't, but I was right there. All right, keep making the world teams. And then I'm going to get to 16, and that's when I'm going to win. And then when I do that, I'm going to be done. Right. So, and I can't say that was for sure my whole plan, but it was just kind of how it felt the whole time, that I just felt like, all right, I'm going to go through 16, I'm going to win, and I'm going to be done. And then obviously I get through there and I don't make the, I don't make the Olympic team. And, it goes back to where we started this thing. I'm not going to pout. I'm not going to, say, well, I didn't get what I wanted. I should just keep doing it. Right. Because one thing that I'm very, strong-willed in, or I'm adamant in, is that I don't do anything halfway. Nothing in my life, whether it be raise my children or have a wife or my job, I can't do it halfway. I won't do it. And to me, if my plan was to be done after 16, then me changing that plan because I didn't get what I wanted would be doing it halfway. Because to me, that's like, all right, well, I'm just going to keep doing this because I'm going to keep chasing that medal, even though I had already kind of in my head said I'm going to go through this and be done. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Like I didn't want to be half in, half out. Yeah, I didn't want to be, it felt desperate, right? It felt like, I didn't get what I wanted, so I'll go one more year and see if I get what I want, right? And then I go one more year. Well, you're not like, to me, I wouldn't be there for the right reasons. Right. I could still train. Hell, my health is unbelievable. I've gotten like pretty much nothing wrong with me. So I've got no good reason to be done wrestling other than it just felt like it was time. And I wasn't going to go back on that feeling just because I didn't get what I wanted. So I think it's probably counterintuitive than what a lot of people's stories I've heard, as far as like coming back because they wanted it so bad. To me, it was just like, it would feel nasty. It would feel dirty. Like I wasn't there for all the right reasons. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not there for all the right reasons, if I'm there because I'm desperate just to get a medal, because I'm desperate just to have my name on a wall, those aren't the right reasons. I want to be there because I love it and because I love the process of what I'm doing. And I wasn't there. And even after 16, I wasn't dead set on being done. It's just, I was like, this is how I feel right now. Because I think Flo or someone was like, hey, do you want to make an announcement? I'm like, nah, one, that's not really my style. And two, like, I don't know, like maybe I'll come back, And then you've got other things going on in life too, right? I was going on, I don't know, 16, 4. Yeah. So I had 3 kids at that time. Life does change. You talk about the effect of women and family, right? Life does change, right? My priority, and maybe this is just being really candid with you, is the health and welfare of my family was way more important in my life than me wanting to win a gold medal, right?
So you became not so selfish at that point. Not so
selfish, yeah. And it was leading up to that too, because it was hard. I mean, you can imagine raising these kids, and my wife's in school, so it was hard, both ways. Like we both had to kind of give and take a lot. And I guess maybe that was kind of it, where I was like, you know what? Like, I want to focus my energy here. Like, how can I make sure that my family has what they need? And that, I don't know. I suppose that was probably it. Was just that became more important. Yeah.
So regional training centers. I mean, at that point, I feel like it's changed a lot since you were at the Hockey Wrestling Club. We have multiple RTCs now, raising lots and lots of money. Yeah. Cycling wrestling, you guys are, we know what you guys are, trying to raise and have raised. And, at that time of how regional training centers were looked at, were you making enough money to be able to provide for your family at that time? Was that one of the factors? Like, hey, I got to go get a job.
No, it was never about money. And I've never done anything in my life about money. Now, money, especially when you have a family, money is a factor. You're lying if you're saying that it isn't. But that is never the reason why I do anything, right? I'm never going to start with money and end with money. Right? Okay, it's all about that. No, it was never about that. In fact, I mean, this is a whole nother line we could get into, but
that's fine.
Yeah, I bet it is. In fact, it had nothing to do with that, with me thinking like, oh, I need to be able to provide more for my family. I mean, it was tough for sure, the living at that time, but it more just became like, it just felt like it was time. It felt like it was time for me to transition into something different, or different goal in life, or whatever, right? So that's probably what led to that. There's definitely not any sort of like, oh, I wanted more money and I couldn't get it, or anything like that. I never ever once asked for more money of anything, because we had what we needed, So
I want to get your perspective on this too, and maybe you've reflected on this. So talking with Thomas Gilman yesterday, he obviously went to Iowa. Yeah. He met his girlfriend really early, and now they're getting married. Kind of same story, similar. Yeah. Didn't get what they wanted. Didn't get what he wanted at the end. And he's at Hockey Wrestling Club. He's leaving. He's leaving for a different perspective, different mindset. And he's in a completely different position now, I think financially, and two, just mentally. Do you ever look back and just wish maybe you had a change of venue, a different coaches, just to kind of, did you just get in a mold? Like, and almost anybody maybe could use a different set of eyes sometimes.
Yeah. I think that's a fair way to put it, because I definitely wouldn't answer this and say that I had regrets about what I did, or that I should have done it different. But what's funny is, I think it was after 2012. It's funny that this all played out exactly how it did with the Gilman. After 2012, my dad called me. He goes, "Hey, call Cal Sanderson, move to Penn State." And wow. I was like, no. I was like, screw you. I ain't doing that. He goes, I don't know Cal at all, you know. But I'm like, he won't get me, or whatever. I was like, that's stupid, this and that. So I stayed obviously there through 2016. But it was just ironic that he had said that. And if you were to ask me to reflect back, I mean, no one knows. I don't know. I can't say that it would have. But as a coach now, right, and as far as experience goes, I kind of sort of do wish I would have. Or things have changed too. You know, at that time, there was a lot of like, you stayed where you were. Does that make sense? Yeah. There wasn't a whole lot of cross training. And by that, I mean, pick anybody, Burroughs, right? Like Burroughs may go out to Pitt, right?
Now he's going to Penn.
Yeah.
I just got announced
he may
today.
go out there and train, and then he may come back, and then maybe he goes to Oklahoma State. And so there's a lot of that going on now, it seems like. Okay. Where back then that didn't happen. Like clubs didn't. It was almost like college still, right? Like clubs didn't talk to each other. You're not allowed to be friends with the guys part of the other club. And I think after going through it all, and then now my perspective as a coach, there's a ton of value in that. A ton of value. We encourage Kyvan. He goes down to Arizona State. He's trained at some different places where I'm like, hey, yeah, man, you want to go do that, go do it, because it's a different look. And I guess where I'm going with this is that Cal's obviously had a ton of success, and now selfishly as a coach, and where I'm at in my position now, I'm like, well, it probably could have helped my wrestling career. Maybe not. Maybe I wouldn't have liked it at all, because as far as I knew, I probably would have hated it, but it would have given me different perspective. And I think perspective is really important when you're dealing with athletes that come from so many different backgrounds and so many different views of the sport of wrestling, that any bit of tools that you can have or any bit of experience you can have, like, hey, maybe this is how they ran their program. I really only know how one program has been run. And then now I'm learning how Kevin Dresser likes to run his program, right? And I'm a part of that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would change history or anything like that, but then when I look back, it's like, yeah, that would have been interesting to get that perspective and to see how they operate, because I'm sure they do it different. Maybe they do it exactly the same. Yeah, and wouldn't that be wild, right? Yeah. If you've got this notion that like you're the only people that train like this, and you're crazy people.
You're outworking everybody,
and it turns out they're doing the exact same thing. So I don't know.
With JB leaving today, well, he's gonna train at Nebraska. If you haven't heard, Jordan Burroughs is gonna be training at Nebraska through the Tokyo Olympics to 2021. Then he will be at Penn RTC. So you've got two big names that really have left. Yeah, Gilman leaving the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, and now Jordan Burroughs, where those guys were the faces of the collegiate program, and now they're essentially kind of, I mean, not so much JB at Penn, but for sure Thomas Gilman, a Hawkeye going to Penn State. It's like, well, you're done with it. Like, Hawkeye fans are probably like, screw you, Gilman. I think maybe.
I don't know if that's fair, and I'm not one to defend a Hawkeye fan, anything like that. But I don't know. I couldn't even guess. I'll give you my own experience. That was definitely not the case for me. When I left and I came over to Iowa State, there I had not felt any real sincere ill will from a fan or from a person, where I felt like, I'm like, man, they really hate me for doing this. I felt nothing but love and support from the fans.
So I think that's a good thing that for RTCs, why that, like you guys, Cyclone Regional Training Center. Okay. If you want to go get somebody that's been at Mizzou, say Jaden Cox. Okay. We want to get Jaden Cox. Seeing these big names leave their alma mater, I think, is good for not only the athlete to feel like they don't have to stay, even though they probably want to most times. It's okay to go out and look at different perspectives, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. With Gilman leaving. And then if you are a fan that feels that way, put yourself in the athlete's shoes, There's lots of things going on. Probably that's the one thing that I think as fans is we look at them on the mat and not what they've got going on personally. Yeah. So whatever Jordan Burroughs has got going on, I mean,
yeah, I think his move is probably, and this is something him and I have talked for years about, kind of where he would like to be at the end of his career. It's probably a family move. I don't know. I haven't talked to him recently, but I would guess it seems like his release is a lot about that, about getting his family back out into that area. I know that he's really proud of where he's from and wants to really make an impact there. So I don't know Gilman's story. She's from out there, right? His wife?
Yes.
Yeah. Or that vicinity, that state. And that was, you talk about, that was an important thing for me, why I decided to stay here in the state and not go to my job in Colorado Springs, was because I knew, I was like, I have an opportunity to stay in the state with family. Yeah. Right. My wife of 3 kids is going to have the support of her family within 2 hours while I'm off doing my job. Right. There's a ton of power in that. I sometimes get torn because, again, I'm a man of my word sort of thing, and that events and how it all unfolded, that I was going to go there and I told him I was going to do it. And then I kind of.
That happened really quick, wasn't it?
Well, I was there for, let's say, 6 months, but I was working remotely because my wife was getting her PhD. And basically, pretty much, we were getting ready to move out to Colorado Springs. I got the call about this. And I just, again, I'm open-minded. I'll listen to anybody and see, what. And at the end of the day, the thing that made the most sense was like, you stay in the state of Iowa. one. I mean, there's so many reasons, but
Yeah.
a lot of it was family, having it here. And I didn't probably even realize the power of it. Because when I look back now, my job as far as time away from family would have been pretty similar, maybe even worse, like longer periods of time out there. I'm like, wow, I'm glad she's got that support, because I couldn't imagine her being in Colorado Springs all by herself with these 3 kids.
Yeah, it's true.
With nothing, because it's a lot harder for her parents to go 12 hours.
Yeah.
And then I've got my family obviously too, but just having them close has been huge. So.
For family, for the kids. So that transition of you being working for USA Wrestling, then at Iowa State, obviously it made big news.
Yeah.
One, just dressers in town. One thing that I love about Dresser is he knows how to make a splash, I guess. I mean, you're working for him for a reason, right? So since kind of, you kind of put the pieces together, and the program, this whole COVID thing just seems like it just really sucks, because especially for a program like you guys, where alumni was back, you guys were doing these events and having some success, not the level of success that you guys wanted right away, right? So I guess before we go there, you just personally as a coach, and just being a family man, a coach, and now you can't be selfish anymore, right? You got not only your family, but you got the Iowa State family. You got these kids, and has there been any sense of, this is just my outside perspective, as watching all your interviews and talking with you, is there any, like, there's still a goal, right? But like, just on a personal level, have you felt like a lot of weight lifted off your shoulder of like not having to like personally go, like it's not your goal anymore, it's somebody else's goal?
I probably feel the opposite.
Okay.
Because the goal is still the same. Like you said, we know where we want to be. We want to win a national title, right? But what makes it so hard is that I really, at the end of the day, I got no control over that, right? It's the guys on the team that do. And I personally can't go out there and do it myself, right? So I can hustle and I can coach you up, and we can do film, and we can do all these things, when we can recruit our butts off, right? But at the end of the day, and this is just probably a wrestling thing, like it feels like it's out of my hands as far as like winning when it comes time to win, right? So in that sense, if you're going to compare it to the stress of like meeting your own expectations on the mat and then a team expectation, I think it's harder.
That makes sense.
Because here, I know what I can do. I know when I'm on the mat that I'm mentally ready, right? But like the example we talked about, I don't know. Maybe I told the guy not to go and do sprints before the finals, but he did it anyway on his own, And he looks like trash. He's tired. And I'm like, what are you doing? So that to me is, I'm not like super stressed out or anything, but that's harder because it's in someone else's hands.
True. Yeah.
So
I guess where I'm trying to go at this is maybe the persona that you had at Iowa of just being laser focused, or just like, at Iowa State, I mean, you're wearing wigs. I mean, you're kind of, it just seems like you're having more fun with your life.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you feel that? Did you instantly feel like I'm having more fun doing this, I guess?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit. So I don't know. You weren't in this job back when I was in college, but I'm trying to think who the best person would talk to. I venture to say, if you asked any of my roommates, and they're being honest, if you could ask the right person, like, hey, like, how much has Metcalf changed since he was in college to now? Personally, they'd say probably not one bit. Because I was still the same guy having fun and goofy. It's just publicly, it was almost intentionally publicly, it was different. And not in a weird way, but, and I still am this way, but like there's a difference between time for life, and time for wrestling. And when I walked in the wrestling room, I was there was like switch on, boom, right? All serious, not in a weird way, but all serious, going in to get a job done, this, and this. The minute practice was over and we're in the sauna, or I know we weren't in the sauna, but we're done. Okay, switch off. Boom. Now we're back to the goofy guy. That's right. So what you're gonna see, what you probably see, is that switch, that you don't get that super intense. It comes out in me, like especially like in a practice. Like if I'm running the practice, I get really zeroed in, right, and I get back to that intense where I'm got the crazy look in my eyes a little bit probably. All right, I can feel it a little bit. I can feel that that intensity during that time. But outside of that, it's just you're seeing just probably just my regular personality. Yeah. And then obviously being a coach now is different times too than it was. When you talk about wearing wigs and things, it's like, all right, how can we? One of the guys on the team wants to have a bet about this. Yeah, sure. Like, what is going to motivate these guys? Yeah. And to that extent, now would I have done that as an athlete? Absolutely not, because the way that I operated was that wrestling was serious. And that you go out and you whoop someone's ass and then you leave and you do your sprints and then you can chill out and relax, right? But that doesn't mean that the way that I did things, that's how that guy operates. Maybe he, like David Carr, if you go hard with him and you try tough guy in him and trying to fit him into that mold, it's not going to work. Not going to work for him. He needs to wrestle with a big smile on his face. Okay. And there's levels to it, right? Because he's still got to have that killer instinct to go out and dominate a guy. But he's going to operate best with a big smile. Or like if he goes out, instead of being in his ear and talking craziness, like this guy's this, instead of that, he operates better if you go in his ear and you say, hey, tell him some silly joke, right? Okay, yeah. And you give him like a one-liner and then you smack him on the butt, right? He smiles and he's going to go out and he's going to perform best. So that's, as a coach, why you're maybe seeing those things, is because it's like, all right, I'm here to serve, right? Like you said, I'm no longer selfish. It's not about me. Yeah. Not about what works for me. It's about whoever athlete maybe I'm dealing with or whatever. The big thing was Willie Mickles, actually. I don't remember what the bet was. It was some sort of bet, right? But if that operates best for them, if that's what's going to help them get to where they want to be or where they need to be, and I think that's what's going to do, I'm going to do that. It don't bother me none. I got no ego when it comes into this, Was
Willie? I mean, you haven't been in this role for a while, but was Willie coming in? Was he a guy that opened up your eyes to like, hey, like he's serious in the room, but he needs a little bit of that? Because we talked to him about this a little bit, about his interaction with you, and I was like, is Metcalf as serious as? How do you guys get along? Because it seems like you guys meshed really well. What was it about, I guess, Willie, that attracted to you as far as a friend and a coach?
I think it's this way with every athlete that we have. It's personalities. It's, it just like when you've got friends in your life, right? You and a certain buddy, like you're on the same wavelength. And when you speak to each other, there's understanding. I think it's the exact same way with athletes. And that's how we kind of sort it up as far as a staff. Sometimes it's not perfect, but you understand when you and an athlete connect on that level, and then usually that ends up being the guy that you end up working with, right? Now, there's certainly, like Willie, for instance, him and I connected, and there was an understanding and there was a respect there naturally, but then there's going to be times too where I'm going to say, hey, Derek, like I need you to work on a single leg with him, and you're way better at it than I am, so why don't you come over here and we'll switch who we're working with for the day or whatever, right? But specifically with Willie, I think immediately we had similar personalities, like where he wasn't probably nearly as intense as I was on the mat, but where there was a switch a little bit, where it was game time. All right, it's off, right? And he was unbelievable for our team because he came in right away and had those things I talked about earlier, where he set a bar, he set an expectation, but then he also could relate to every single guy. Like there wasn't a single person on that team that didn't love Willie dearly and wouldn't run through a wall for him. Okay. So now you've set up the foundation for a leader that can really do some damage, right? That can really help bring a team along. Right. So that's where he was awesome for us.
When you talked just a little bit about, maybe putting that pressure on yourself as a coach to see guys perform. And we talked with Willie about this a little bit, about his senior year and some of the NCAA championships and the interview that he did, the letter that he had, and then he talked about you and his conversation a little bit about him realizing that his goal of being a national champ that year was gone, I guess. Mm-hmm. What were you feeling at that time as a coach, a younger coach? And from your experiences, like what were some things that maybe he didn't tell us that he needed to hear at that point to be able to come back and make sure he gets All-American status? You know?
One, you talk about a coaching fail, right? And we said this already, where maybe you think a guy's doing one thing. Like I had no idea that if I had known that he was, because I know how emotional he is, and I'd known that was going to happen, I would have sounded all alarms. It would have been canceled. He wasn't even going to be doing it, right? Because I know him, and I know that wasn't going to be well for him in his mind. And that's not an excuse, okay? Yep. But for sure, and he's said as much, that probably wasn't a very good thing for him to emotionally go through, because it was already really heavy on him just in general. So to sit there and unload that and then walk on the mat and wrestle wasn't best for him. So to me, I took that as kind of a fail. I was like, we got the kid at like the biggest event of his life, and then we're asking him to do this. Like, what the heck? Like, I messed up by not knowing, right? Maybe not asking the right question. Maybe not, like you said, giving him a lot of freedom and not making sure that he was on the path that we both thought he was on, right? So that'd be number one. Number two was, it was a unique, I mean, imagine, talking about how hard it is dealing with death and things, having to deal with that right out the gate, you know, and manage an athlete like that. Now, fortunately, I had been through it, but everyone's story and everyone's, what the hardest thing about death is everyone handles it so much different. And I can't sit there, and him and I talked about this a ton. I can't sit there and say, hey, here's how I dealt with it, and it's going to work, so you should do that. Everyone manages death differently. But in that moment, I remember it was late. I don't know how late it was, maybe 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I was actually sitting in my room, and I usually don't mess with the guys too much. I usually, like, hey, what's your plan? Aren't you doing this? Maybe I send them a text to say, you're the man, have a good night, or something like that. But it was like stirring me up a little bit. And I was torn because I was like, all right, am I going to sit here and assume that Willie's a 10th year senior? Right?
Basically.
He's a 10th year senior. He's been here. He's done that. He knows what he's doing. He's got it. Or do I got to say something? And I was like, I couldn't sleep. I was like, what do I do? And I was like, I got to go say something because I don't want to regret this. I was like, I don't think it's going to mess with him too much if I go do that. So I went in there and I thought about how to handle it. And I don't know, I think at that time, I think just honesty was going to be key. And I used my own experience a little bit where I was just like, hey, like, you have to forget what just happened. You have to act like it did not happen. Because I can promise you this, okay? However you handle this, okay? If you don't make All-American, you're going to have a lot of regret in your life. Because you're going to have handled it wrong, right? And I don't know what the right answer is for you. So let's figure it out. And I can't tell you what the answer it is, but smack yourself in the face. Be someone maybe you're not, okay? Because he's an emotional guy. He wants to be relaxed and fun. But I was like, do whatever it takes to be an All-American. Because then you'll reflect on this and you'll be happy. You'll be satisfied. You'll know that it was a tough thing. You know that maybe there was mistakes made. But you won't have like regret that eats at you compared to the other thing that I saw happen, I was worried about, was that he would let it consume him. He would start feeling sorry for himself and saying, "What? It doesn't like
that's easy.
And this is easy. It doesn't matter if I can't win. I've already been an All-American 3 times. Like, who cares, right?
Yeah,
you're gonna care in this moment. You probably don't think that you care, but you will care. Yeah. Okay, and once it's literally gonna be 3 days from now. You will care, but right now it feels like it doesn't matter. So." I don't remember exactly what I said to him or something, but it was kind of that message, which was like, hey, get your head right. Yeah. And I didn't normally talk to him that way. Him and I had a very kind of loose fun because he was the same sort of guy where he operated pretty loose, but there was moments when he needed me to step in, and because he was almost a peer, you know what I mean? Because he's so old, right? So it's one of those weird dynamics. Like you said, it was more of a friendship than a coach athlete relationship. But there are definitely moments where he, and everyone needs this, where someone needs to step in and tell him what's what, and say, listen, you ain't cutting it. change it. But he couldn't have operated if you'd have been the hardcore coach on him. He would have told you to bug off if it was every single day. If you would just, he couldn't have handled that, right? So I don't know. I'm not claiming.
He basically said that. I mean, he didn't go into the whole conversation, but he just said, Metcalf told me, like, those other kids that you're gonna wake up tomorrow morning, they don't care that this happened to you, and that's what he told me. But one thing that really stuck with me, obviously, like, you these accolades or whatever it may be, you know, it is what it is. You know, he said that letter was the best thing he's ever done.
Yeah.
So that was pretty. Mm-hmm. That was pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And even though it completely changed the record books for him and what he thought he was, you know, wrestling for that year.
Yeah.
Like, that was pretty cool to hear. So
at
whatever you did.
At the end of the day, the people you were interacting with in your life and how people are, let's going to say, judge you or remember you, generally not going to have to do with how many titles you won, or none of that's important. They're going to remember you for who you are and the sort of impact that you had on those around you. And I think he's come to terms with that, you know, that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you weren't a national champion. You're an unbelievable person, you know, and you're going to go a long ways with that. So.
All right. So, I wish him the best of luck. I think he's going to be, I think he's going to be able to, on a coaching level, from my interactions with him, is he knows when to get serious. He's kind of like what you've been saying. He knows when to get serious, but he also knows when a kid, he's going to know that kid that's going to need that, like, slap in the ass, be like, hey, let's go get Dairy Queen after this, or I don't know, whatever. You know what I mean? I think he's going to be very good at that. So I'm looking forward to what he can do at Michigan State. Hopefully he comes back to the state sometime, Iowa. So going forward, you know, with Iowa State, and obviously can't talk about recruiting, but as putting the team together. So now you guys have you'd be able to, you know, recruit some of these guys that are going to be coming in, and these guys, if they're going to be here, they've bought into the system now to an extent. To an extent, right? You know, what are your thoughts on the team now versus like when you came in, as far as, you know, the goals being maybe different they were when you first got there to now, and how are things looking for you guys? And if we have a season, right? I mean, we're assuming we get to have a season at some point. So how do you think the team's come together?
I think good. I think every day and month there's growth. I see growth. And this has been something that has been awesome for me to be a part of, because as far as learning as a young coach, I think being a part of building something gave me way more experience and what's the right word? Appreciation. Sure. Like it made me have to answer or go through a lot of challenging questions or times, compared to had my first coaching gig been somewhere where we're winning, we're kicking butt, and it's like, keep the train moving. Right. Because I give Dresser a ton of credit. I mean, how we handled, you know, you talk about from then to now, you know, I remember walking in thinking like, this whole team needs to go. Right. But that's me just being a hard ass, right? That's like, this is unacceptable. Right. But Dresser's, the way that he handled it was awesome, where it was like children a little bit, like, all right, like, let's slowly work them in. And then basically they will personally eventually decide whether they're on board or not, you know? And between that first year, we lost 19 guys, and not a single one of them was from us saying, hey, you're not up to par or up to snuff with our program. You know, you're out of here. Not a single guy was kicked out. It was all like a progression of, hey, here's the standard, maybe some forgiveness, maybe some challenging some guys, right? But the standard, and then guys just decided it wasn't for them. There was obviously some social issues that guys' hands get forced because they're failing tests or things like that. But going through that was unbelievable, because I just remember coming in, like, thinking in my head and being young and dumb, being like, this is how you do it, right? This is how you turn a program around. And then after doing it, being like, God, I'm so glad we didn't do that. You know, because there's guys now I mean, you knew but you just saw you've seen so much growth in them.
Yeah.
Same, you go back on the story of my brother, right? Where, like, my instinct was to just be hard ass with him and give up on him, right? And instead of giving him grace and giving him an opportunity or a path to say, hey, you can get to where you want to be, So that's been something that's been awesome to go through just in these first 2.5 years or whatever, 3 years, to see that and see where we are now. And what's really exciting for me is bringing these new guys in, because you talk about having a group of guys or a social structure that's already bought in, knowing that the new guys coming in, it's one thing for a coach to sit and say, hey, here's how we operate like this. It's way more powerful for them to go home with their buddies and their roommates and have them be held to that standard. So the coach can sit and bark all he wants, but until the teammates start to hold you to that standard, that expectation, it seems really hard to get guys to go, right? So I'm excited about it because I feel like our team's, it's getting there, right? Where the standard's about where we want it, and guys are like coming in on your own and training, like just those little things. There's 100 of just little things. Diet. You could talk about, I think, weight management. All those little things they're starting to take on as a team, right? So when you talk about these new guys coming in, that's what they're going to be walking into. Coach is going to be talking about it, but they're going to be seeing their teammates coming in early, getting extra workouts in, or on their own just drilling at 9:00 at night, and that to me is going to sway those young guys and teach them a lot quicker than what I could ever teach them. I feel like just barking at them and saying, you should do this, right? I
mean, just hearing this situation, it kind of reminds me, I'm picturing yourself in this situation when you're in the Iowa room, is you want to lead by example, and you're saying like you need somebody on the Iowa State team to be that, maybe be that leader.
A whole mess of them. Yeah,
a bunch, so looking back when you're like, hey, this whole team needs to go, compared to now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, what's one kid that you're like, man, this is going to be tough, to where now they're like, just completely flipped like a 180. You're like, I'm so glad that kid stayed and you bought into it. Like, you as a coach, maybe you invested in him a little bit more, and now he's where he's at now.
I don't know if I want to pick out one name or not.
I have one name, but
you do? Why don't you tell me what your name is?
I mean, Gremmel would be mine that I think of.
Yeah, the Gremmel would be a pretty good one.
Just knowing maybe his personality.
How about this? Know that when I say this whole team needs to go, I don't literally mean that.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But there's like frustration. You're like, oh my God, these guys are so far off page, it ain't even funny, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I mean when I say that they all should go. Gremmel's a pretty good example of a guy. I'm going to be tough on Grem, though, is that he's got more and he knows he's got more.
Yeah.
He knows he's got more in there. So I think, I don't know. I'm not going to pick a name out, but just in general, I don't think there's any of the guys that come to my mind weren't necessarily guys that I wanted kicked off the team in real life, but guys where I was like, this guy's going to have a hard time winning. He's going to have a hard time doing what he's doing. And there's probably 5 or 6 that I can think in my head that just have bought into the extent where they're giving themselves a chance now. The diet and the weight management is no longer an issue. I mean, it's amazing, something as simple as that, how powerful it can be for a guy. You think like, oh, you need to learn all these high level techniques and everything. Hell, if you could feel good every day while you're training, and when you step on the mat after a 2-hour weigh-in, feel like $1 million, that's pretty powerful in itself,
Just putting more structure to their.
Yeah.
The reason why I say Gremmel, I don't know. I mean, whenever I talk to people about him, is he's always just been a unique individual for me, because he still does, but in high school he had all the talent in the world, and he always felt like he didn't really care if he won or lost, but he did care, because he did, And then when he got to Iowa State, it's a whole nother level. D1 wrestling, and don't think he got his goals. And then last year I remember talking with him, and he just seemed like his mindset was just completely changed. Like, I know that I can compete at, I can be at the All-American level. I can try to compete for a national championship. It just seems like his his mindset changed from when he first got to Iowa State to now.
Yeah.
But I do agree that there's more things that he can be doing, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I'm not in the coaching staff, but this is outside perspective as a fan. And I guess I do consider myself a fan still. But
I'd say that the biggest thing I always challenge guys with, and again, I had to slowly do this because if you challenge guys with this right away, they're just going to run, right? But, the biggest thing that I saw, and I feel like the change that's happened is like walking in, like, what's your priority in life? Like when you wake up in the morning, what do you think about? Do you think about partying? Do you think about girls? Do you think about school? Which you should. School should be right up there, right? Do you think about your Twitter? You think about all these other things that you could be spending time and energy on? Or do you wake up in the morning and do you think, how can I get better at wrestling today, right? Or do you think about your dreams, your aspirations with the sport of wrestling, right? Now, that's fanatical a little bit, but in all honesty, I've been around a lot of guys that have won at the highest level, and they're fanatics. I don't care what any of those Penn State guys say about having fun and this and that, and we're juggling around. Okay, those guys are fanatics. I've talked to them all. Okay, they're all highly driven by winning and winning at the highest level. Now their way of doing it is it fun, right? But I think it gets skewed sometimes into thinking that fun means like you don't have to make sacrifices in your life to have the things that you want, and that's the complete opposite true, right? Is the fun, they're still making a ton of sacrifices, and those sacrifices could be diet, but it could be time. I mean, talk about, while I was at college, sure we had time, but there wasn't a whole lot of time in my life for going to the bars. There wasn't a whole time in my life for anything else other than just wrestling. And it's almost like I had to find time on purpose to like, all right, let me get away from wrestling and go do this. Right? Maybe it was hunting, right? Yeah. On purpose, I'm going to get away. I'm going to schedule. All right, boom, I'm going to do it on this day. I'm going to schedule just so I can be out in the trees and listen to birds tweet. Right. And that's a challenge that I continually had was like, hey, like you could sit and tell me, coach, I want to be national champ. Okay, well, when you wake up in the morning, is that what you think about? And then do you plan your day around how you're going to do that? And once you get there, then you're giving yourself a chance. When you're waking up in the morning, you're not just eating the first thing in front of you, but you're thinking about how is this food going to help me right now so it can help my workout that I'm going to have in a little bit. All right, and then after the workout, am I going to go to the pool and soak in the sun? Okay, obviously, there's different times. There's times for that, right? But or am I going to go screw off and do this? Or am I going to come back and make sure I get my 2 hours of rest? Okay, am I going to spend some time with my girlfriend? And then like plan, like you're going to plan your whole day around winning. And part of that's academics too, right? So part of you got a piece because you can't win if you're not doing well in the classroom, right? So that's kind of been my challenge to a lot of these guys is like, hey, when you get there, then when you won't even have to tell me you want to win the nationals. I'll know because I'll see it.
Yeah.
I'll see a guy that's coming to practice 15 minutes early, just sitting there. Right. Because he planned it. He planned on leaving his apartment at this time so he could get his shoes on. He was going to be relaxed. He wasn't going to run in and get his shoes on really fast. He was going to be relaxed. His shoes were going to be on, chatting with his buddies, just relaxing. All right, kind of gearing up mentally for practice, however you do that. I'll know it. You won't have to tell. You won't have to convince me that you want to be a national champion. And that's the change that I've seen. And that's even in the last year. That's what's so tough about this COVID thing is, there was a corner being turned. And as you've talked about, as a program that's growing, you almost feel like you're trying to prove you're trying to prove yourself a little bit, or for your team's sake, you want them to have the opportunity to show the growth that they've made. And they got robbed of that. Not robbed, but they got robbed of that opportunity to show the growth that has happened. So yeah.
Two more, hopefully only two more questions. We've been going for quite a while here. So
I talk too damn much, don't I?
No, this is great. No, I could talk to wrestling for 3 hours, but I know people have other jobs. Wanted to get to Austin Gomez. Sounds like his dad's doing better.
Yeah, I think the last I talked to him, he just got off the ventilator. He is working on physical therapy for walking because again, I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but I think that being incubated, if that's the right word, being in a bed for so long, I think there's been muscle fatigue and things. So I think he's doing like walking therapy right now.
That's good.
But that's awesome. I mean, from where he was at first, you know, when you talk about the sort of people that are most at risk, and the dude fought. He's a fighter. And we know that. I asked Austin, he goes, this was yesterday. He goes, FaceTime my dad yesterday. I goes, let me guess. I goes, was he quiet or did he talk crap about how COVID can't beat him? He goes, oh yeah. That thing can't take me. Nothing can stop me.
So Austin, so that's great. I know there's a GoFundMe for his family right now, so you can go check that out. Yep. It's on Austin's Twitter page. I've seen that. Well, I'll make sure that I get it out there too if you aren't familiar with that. But Austin, on a personal level, this is a kid that highly ranked recruit coming in. Mm-hmm. On the world level too, right? Yeah, I mean, he's got great freestyle background, and you know, he's had concussion. You know, he's had he just hasn't been able just to be healthy, I guess. You know, and he's a key component, I would imagine, to your team next year of how that overall looks. Yeah. So you know, there's with him not being able to be in the room as much as maybe you want him to be, just because of health reasons throughout the season. And you know, so there's talks about how much he weighs now and what he needs to get down to. So can you touch a little bit on Austin Gomez right now? Obviously he's got a lot going on, but you know, how's he look for 2021 here and getting him in the lineup?
He's huge because as we've been talking about, when you talk about a guy that's a great leader, you talk about a guy that's highly respected on the team, and a guy that every single day you could pop your head in at any second during the workout and he'd be doing it right. And by that I mean he'd be doing it hard. It don't matter if he got taken down, he's still fighting, scrapping. You know, that to me, it's not about points, especially in the press room. It's not about points. It's about your fight, your effort, the amount of risk you're willing to take, right? Like that you're going after it. You're not trying to sit and win practice. You know, he's that guy. So he's huge for our team. So what you said was, how much was the loss? The loss was hard because you just took away a notch, right? Now we've got other guys that are doing a great job too. But when you've got guys battling and then you put another one in there, a huge ramrod, they all go to another level. And I'm sure they would all say the same thing, that you know, having him gone hurts, right? So yeah, I think to me, everything's good on his end as far as he's dialed back in. Again, everyone handles things differently. He does have a lot that he's been dealt with in life. When you talk about me and my career, I'm willing to admit that I didn't have no injuries. No injuries, right? I didn't have that many challenges. I was pretty spoiled when it comes to those sorts of challenges that make training really hard, right? And he certainly had his fair share of them. Plenty of them, and at the worst times, you know. So that's something that him and I talk a lot about getting through those things, and just about everything we've talked about how to get through those and how to just keep moving and how to stay focused on what's ahead of you and not worried about what's behind you. His key is going to be weight management. It's going to be, here's the deal. Some guys, I saw this in college too while I was in college. I told you the biggest I ever did. I'm talking about summertime. I'm fat and happy. I was 12 pounds over, which is not that much, right? Jay Borschel was our 74-pounder. Summertime, dude weighed 220. Okay, and he'd be proud and loud about it. He'd be coming in, I'm 215 today, guys. I'm like, Borschel, you can't make weight, man. What are you doing? Oh, no, I'm good, you know. But when it came time for season, he was disciplined. He did it right. He was the last guy you'd be seeing cutting weight. Yeah. It was almost like he wasn't cutting weight. He was one of those guys where you're like, oh, you get to eat, man.
It's crazy.
But people's bodies are just different. And I don't know if Borschel can attest that or not, you know, how hard he had to work at it or whatever. But he's got a body where, like, if he doesn't work at it, and now that whether that's what sort of food you're putting in or whether you're actually exercising, if he doesn't work at it all the time, if he doesn't wake up and think about it, and work at it, his body just wants to grow. And by grow, I mean get big, right? So he's going to be good either way.
What are you trying to get him down to? Like, what's he wanting to get down to?
I think he's targets getting 133. Okay. But again, my philosophy, I mean, obviously I think that that's a great spot for him, especially you got Ian Park at 41. I mean, it makes most sense. But two, at the end of the day, I'm like, hey man, like you go whoop ass wherever you want to whoop ass. But we got to do it right. You can't be fat and sloppy wrestling 165 pounds, and he knows all this. He doesn't need to hear that. But no, he's cute and he's good. Those guys are all on their own training right now. They're not anything. I mean, I never even got to see him wrestle really in the longest time because we can't.
Don't know where you're.
But he's dialed in. I can tell he's dialed in, and I know the weight's coming down, and that'll be the big thing for him. And he's said that to the in public as well. Can
you still talk? You can still talk with the athletes just on the mental side of things. You just can't actually physically be in contact with them. What's the official rule right now? I guess.
Yeah. Well, what's tough is that everyone's a little different, and a lot of this is hearsay. So don't call any of this gospel or anything like that. But every university and conference is a little different, right? So, for instance, I think Iowa has been training for a while.
Okay.
Right now, not that would probably be voluntary workouts, just like summer, right? I think that they have been for a while. I know you and I, they have been for a while. Just legally, right? Now, our AD and he has determined that he wanted to focus on football, so we haven't been able to. So any of the training that they're doing is all going to be. It's been directed by the athletes, so like Ian Parker, Dagan. Kyvan has been big too, of just getting the team together and doing workouts on their own, of which nothing that we can organize, structure, watch, be a part of.
Wow.
I think August 1st is supposed to be our go time that we're able to.
Gotcha.
And that's not criticizing anyone. That's just, I think each institution and I think you had to fall under your guidelines of your conference, and then each institution was given the flexibility to arrange their schedules how they wanted to beyond that. So yeah, we're literally I can't do anything.
You're waiting. Yeah. You guys are probably chomping.
So yeah, I
bit.
can talk to them, I can ask them how everything's going. I can call them everything. I can FaceTime them. So I certainly can't endorse or require that they do something.
Certain things.
Like
Yeah.
that,
Makes sense. So if we've had this time away where you haven't been able to be on the mat, haven't been able to see the successes and the downfalls. What's one you be able to get back on the mat? We do get to compete at some point in 2021. Is there an event or is there anything specific that comes to mind that you're really excited about to be able to, that you miss maybe that you get to go back and do?
Every single day training. That's probably to me what I love the most. I mean, I know that guys generally you train to compete, right? And I love competing, and competing's awesome. But like I was a sick little dude. I loved every single day grind. So as a coach, I'm kind of the same way. Like I miss being in the room every single day, right? And whether I'm on the mat or I'm not on the mat, I love just being in that grind. And it's like you said, solving a puzzle, just constantly working and growing and growing and growing. And then our competitions, it's time to show off, right? To show about all the work you've done, or to kind of see where you fall. So that's probably what I miss the most, is just being in the room every day. And then on top of that, you talk about the struggles of COVID and isolation.
Yeah.
And my wife, I tell her now, I'm like, man, I really, because moving to a new community and having like friends and things, she didn't really know anybody, so it was hard. And I was like, I'm getting more of a feel for what you're talking about, because my job, I've got like 40 good friends, and I've got 5 coaches that are my best friends. Like I'm with people every single day. I'm with, your athletes are basically your friends. You engage with them. There's discussion, and I miss that. I miss that that companionship. That I had every single day, probably twice a day, to now like none. And not that I don't love my family, but I told her, I was like, I get what you're saying. Like, man, this sucks. Like there's no one to talk to. So luckily I got to know my neighbors a little better. But
so one last thing here before we let you go. COVID's gone. You can travel anywhere. What's the one, where not wrestling related, what's the one thing you're hunting, and where would it be?
One thing I'm hunting?
What would you like to hunt, and where would it be?
Well, that's 2 different questions here. You can't ask me what's like a dream hunt and then ask me about COVID, because those are 2 different things.
So no, I'm saying COVID's gone. So they say everything's gone, boom. I have no wrestling duties, no family duties. I'm going to hop on a plane. I'm going to Alaska. Where are you going? And
money's not an issue.
Money's not an issue.
Filthy rich.
Filthy rich.
Oh, that's tough.
You're not right.
I'm going to go with, I got to pick one here. Probably a stone sheep with a bow.
Stone sheep with a bow. So where would that be?
Or a Marco Polo. That'd be awesome too.
Where would the stone sheep be? I don't know much about hunting.
They've got them up in Canada.
Okay.
Yep. I don't know if there's any in the United States, but you're talking about like $50,000 just to start.
Why? Because of the travel, or just to get on the sheep?
Exclusivity. A Marco Polo though, you'd be going over to like Mongolia or like one of those countries. That would be awesome. But that'd be a lot. But you're talking about 100,000 plus to do that.
Wow.
But those things curl and curl. So yeah.
It's just because it's
this is pipe dream though.
Is it just because it had to be like a guide?
Yes,
like you have to pay the guides.
Guided, yep.
Gotcha.
I'm basically just paying you.
Yeah.
You'll get a tag for me and I'll show up and then you'll hike me up the mountain.
Gotcha.
But that would be like a dream hunt. It had nothing to do with COVID. That would be a dream hunt only because, again, I'm a little crazy person, because you're hunting these things at like 16, 17,000 feet. So the travel to get, imagine how hard it is, when people like, hike Mount Everest or whatever, right? So they're hiking and there's a difficulty and then you lose an oxygen. That's different. So to me, the challenge of hiking and getting up in those mountains, because you don't get dropped off by a helicopter. You got to get up there.
Okay. And
then living up there and staying up there and finding these things and then outsmarting them in their own backyard.
How many day hunt would it be?
It could be up to 2 weeks probably.
Wow.
And you still may not get one, especially with a bow.
Yeah.
Because with a rifle, you could reach out, let's just say 600 yards easy. But with a bow, you got to get them probably within 50.
Wow.
So
you gotta be right on them.
That would be, and again, it probably has less to do with the animal and more just the challenge of it. Like the challenge of like, okay, this would be the hardest thing. Like if I were able to do it, I would have a lot of satisfaction over like, okay, I was able to endure that. I was able to get to the top of the mountain, find this thing, trick it more or less, right?
Mm-hmm.
Walking by me and get it. So
I don't hunt. I did go on my first turkey hunt this year I followed Mitch Johnson, former wrestler. Followed him on a turkey hunt. We got up 4:00 in the morning, sat in the blind. There is a lot of similarities about like having to be disciplined. Like there's a lot of wrestling similarities that go into a hunting that it just really intrigues me. So I'm hoping to do more like live hunts with people, like former wrestlers and stuff. It was really like, and to get wrestlers' perspectives of like what's going through their head, like before you even get there, when you get there, what you do. Yeah. It's just I could see myself just going crazy. Yeah,
that's the problem. And I have an addictive personality in that whatever I get into. So like I used to skateboard, right? Like I skateboarded so much that I thought I was going to be in the X Games. Like I was training to be an X Games skater, right? And then hunting, and I've realized this about myself. I've realized it early on, like during college. I was like, wow, like I want to be the best. However the hell you be the best at it, right? But what's interesting about hunting, and this isn't always the case, but generally, the rewards come by how hard you work, right? The more energy you put into it, the more time, the farther you're willing to hike. Usually those things equal success. Not always. Obviously, sometimes you stumble upon things, and sometimes smarter is better, right? But generally, the harder you work at it, the more success you'll have. And it's just like you said, just like wrestling. Yeah. And that's probably why it's rewarding to me, is because I know if I could put the energy in, I can get that ultimate reward. And at the end of the day, a real hunter, I'll say real hunter because there are no real ones, but a real hunter, it's not about like the trophy. It's not about, for me at least, the antlers. I mean, you do it, but to me, it's about, like I talked about, the reward. Like, I find no satisfaction, not in like shotgun hunting. I don't like very much, because basically you stand against a tree, you got buddies that push a timber, and the deer all herd out, 30 or 40 of them herd out, and then if you planned it right, they run right by you, and then you unload your gun on them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And hopefully you hit one. Hopefully you hit the biggest one. Right. I did that and I hate it because it's just killing. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, and like there's no satisfaction to that for me. Same way as if I've had a few times where I was archery hunting and it was somebody else's land and they're like, hey, come hunt. I'll put you in a tree stand. Okay. I went there, dumb luck, hunted for like 20 minutes. Giant buck comes by, I shoot it. It's good and all, but there's just the satisfaction isn't there compared to when you've got like a raw piece of property and you hike every piece of that piece of property to try to learn it. And then you put stands up, you make mistakes again, like a wrestling career, right? You make mistakes, you do this, you do that. And then finally you get the one that you've been going after for 4 years and has slipped you so many dang times you got him. And it doesn't even matter if he's big or not. Right. Cause it was like the adventure to get there. It was like, I did it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the work that you put in and everything that got to that moment that makes it unbelievable. Or all the failures behind, talk about elk hunting, 5 years and years and years of going and failing, and then it finally comes together and works. God, like that's like winning a wrestling match is how it feels. It's how it feels. So yeah, you're on track there.
Mitch had the same, like we went bow. It was bow hunting. So
okay. Well, that's harder. That's
so we
definitely
went
harder.
Bow for the turkeys. We moved to 2 different places, but I just have a lot of respect now for, you know, why he hunts and why other people hunt and why he prefers bow over gun. And you know, I've talked to other wrestlers that have kind of the same mindset of like, you know, some people like shoot shotgun just for, you know, to get an animal, I guess.
Which is fine.
But yeah,
you're feeding your family, man. You're eating. It's all good.
For sure. So, all right. Well, we've been going about 2 hours here. So we'll have a live hunting show with Brent Metcalf maybe next year.
Oh yeah, we could go 3 hours doing that.
You were sponsored for a while from
I mean, sponsorship probably isn't the word, but yeah,
they gave you stuff.
Yeah, just
who was that?
I had a good relationship with Mossy Oak, Banded, Banded Brands, which is a it's like an Under Armour thing like that. It's like a company that makes clothing, and Mossy Oak is one of their colors that they use. But
gotcha.
Yeah, those were just things where. Relationships. You came up with people and like, hey, you're into hunting, so let's just work together.
I remember you had a camo single. Anyways,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right. So, thank you for coming on the program, coming on the show, and kind of, you know, talking a little bit about your. I mean, we could talk a lot longer, I think, and I would like to someday maybe go through each season and kind of those hurdles and stuff. But broad wise, looking at the big picture, I think there's lots of takeaways for other people that have, you know, listened to kind of what you've been going through, and people that maybe aren't going through anything and be like, you know, I really don't have it that bad. Yeah. Like I should work harder, you know? So, and you know, like the Willie Michaelis deal, like it's not the end of the world. He didn't get a national title, but like, you know, those moments. Anyways, appreciate you coming on the show, and I wish you guys the best of luck. If you guys can get a season, I'm praying that we can wrestle at some point. I do appreciate everything that growing up so close to Ames, everything that, you know, Dresser and you and St. John and RTC, what you guys have done to bring back alumni. I mean, my dad has never bought season tickets before. We live 30 minutes from there. He's got season tickets now.
Awesome.
So like those little things, you know, make, you know, it frustrated me why we can't be wrestling right now, because you guys were going the path and you pick it right back up, I'm assuming. But I hope we can get back on a positive track for all sports, all for wrestling. So thanks for coming on, and thank you for listening to another episode of Potentially Dangerous. If you got any questions for Coach Metcalf that we didn't get asked on the program, drop them on the comment section, and I will forward them on, try to get them answered. If you got any programs for Coach Dresser and company, for Iowa State, anything like that, just drop them in, shoot me a direct message, whatever, and I will get them to the right place. Also, in regards to the Gomez GoFundMe, if you have trouble finding the link, let me know, and I'll text it to you or direct message you. Make sure that gets in the right hands as well. So appreciate everybody for listening, and next week we'll be right back here at 12 o'clock live on Facebook and Rockfin. Thanks for watching.